Mr. Chair, you are now live.
Looks like the YouTube is starting to stream, and once Julian comes back and confirms everything's good on his end, we'll go ahead and get going.
You are good to go. Ben, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Ross can hear you.
Thanks, Ross. I think he might be having issues hearing me. Bob, can you maybe try to come in?
Everything good, Julian?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I don't know why my audio is not coming through. Can you hear me now, Ben?
Ben, can you hear anybody?
All right, I guess I had you on mute, Julian. I didn't hear your response. So I guess we're ready to go. I see YouTube's ready. We have, looks like we have a quorum. Any reason not to begin from the commissioners? Okay, go ahead and call this meeting to order for Wednesday, August 26, 2020, the Planning Commission for the City of Annapolis. Tammy, can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Sale,
Here.
Mr. Waldman,
Present?
Mr. Pline,
Present.
Ms. Butler,
Here.
Mr. Imes. Good.
And we were waiting on Mr. Imes, but to no avail at the moment. I'll try to give him another heads up on the side. Did anybody hear any reason why he wouldn't have been here? I didn't see anything. Okay, thank you. If my computer cuts out for any reason, please, Bob Waldman, take over the reins because I've had some issues today. So we'll see. All right. First of all, the agenda as written, would like to modify that from the public hearings down at the bottom, items 2 and 3. They're the two pieces of legislation. We had talked earlier about moving those to first in the public hearing section. So I'd like to have us talk about that right now. Does anybody have any issue with that before we do it?
Yes, I disagree. I kind of disagree. There are many people here from the applicant from the Parks Place proposal at some expense. And I think I would personally would prefer to see that go first and just get it done and out of the way. And then we may have some extended discussion about the legislation, but I don't think that we need to have everybody hear that.
Okay. Good point. Anybody else? And there's really going to be nobody here yet for those two pieces of legislation other than our alderman. Okay, so if we can then leave it as written for the public hearings in order 1, 2, and 3. Anybody else have any comments to that? So we're not changing anything. Okay, great. Moving on to the next item, approval of minutes for the July 22nd meeting. Give everybody a minute or two to look over their files for that. Any questions? All right, any questions on the minutes right now? Anything?
No, I make a motion to adopt as written.
Okay.
Okay. Then there's a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed or abstentions? Okay, it's unanimous. Passes. Approval of minutes. Thank you very much. Moving on to the approval of opinion. We had an opinion approval, last opinion on approval for plan review application for 106, 108 Annapolis Street. Last meeting for the proposed redevelopment of subject property with a 2-story mixed-use building containing approximately 4,400 square feet of commercial space. Our lawyer on staff for the Planning Commission drafted that opinion, and it was emailed to the commissioners in advance. Also, you should have that in front of you now. There was no major changes that I saw of a major nature, but does anyone have any thing to add to that opinion as we have it written and drafted? Any comments from the commissioners? I guess that's what happens when a lawyer writes that opinion. It's pretty tight and nobody feels the need to change anything. Okay.
Bob, did you had one suggestion? Is that in there?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The last condition, it simply says that the applicant shall grade the alleyway at the end of construction.
For our legal representation on staff, any comments to that?
Yeah, there's just a couple comments and they were incorporated. And I certainly shortened the opinion to make it easier to read. So it's ready for your consideration.
Anyone else have any comments with regard to the opinion of order from Mr. Beard?
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a first and a second to approve the minutes as amended from Mr. Beard, and we've seen. All those in favor say aye.
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 Or abstentions?
You meant the opinion, not the minutes.
Did I just say minutes? I meant opinion.
Very
Thank you very much if I did say that. So the opinion passes with the modification as proposed. Moving on to the next item, trying to get quickly to our items of, oh geez. I'm having computer issues. So if my screen's blanking, but it's still there. You can still hear me, Alex? Okay, thank you.
We can see it too.
Okay, good. All right, it's going very well actually so far. All right. So approval opinion completed. Now on to the public hearings, and we're going to go right back into the open public hearing that's already open for the plan development PD 2018-002 plan development and preliminary record plat by JBJ Management Company to consider modification of the Park Place development to add a 4-story 134-room hotel on property located at Taylor Avenue. Continued from our July 22nd meeting. So this is already open. I don't need to open the public hearing on this one again. And now we're into that. We've already had the briefing on the hotel, and we've actually started talking about it, but we need to continue into that talk for the commissioners for any questions for the initial briefing before we go into anything else. And is there anything, any other change to the way we're proceeding with that? Anyone has any recommendations for flow that they'd rather do? We do have quite a few people here evidently for this item.
Well, there were some proposed, we received some new drawings, some amendments, and I would like to hear from the team as to where they are and what's going on at this stage of the game. So if Mr. Hyatt, I'd like to hear from him.
Thank
I
you.
feel it's a continuation of the existing brief for the amendments that we've had. And then we can actually go into public comments items that we have. So that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Bob. Anybody else have an issue with that?
Nope.
Okay, we'll proceed right into that. Mr. Hyatt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, we went through the proceeding on July 22nd. We presented our case, and there was some feedback from the members of the Planning Commission regarding a number of items. And what I would like to do is I want to have Ms. Fogarty make a couple of statements because she was she quickly concluded her presentation at the very end, if you recall. And then I'm going to have Mr. Schuman identify changes that have been made to the traffic mitigation plans, I'll call them. You know, we have two alternatives that we presented. One was the traffic island, and one was the traffic circle. I think we all agree we like the traffic circle, but that's going to require a acquisition of land, which you know, that's a condition of us being able to do the circle. So what I'll do now is turn it over to Eileen Fogarty, who will just kind of summarize the presentation in a brief fashion. And then after she gets done with that, I'll have Mr. Schuman run through the changes that we have made on the plans that we distributed on August 18th. So,
Thanks.
Eileen?
Yeah, thanks very much, Alan. And Terry, can you move to slide 2? Since we last met, this team has been very busy responding to the Planning Commission's comments and questions. As you'll see from these 2 diagrams, which Terry will go over in great detail with all of you, we've identified all of the pedestrian and safety measures for either option, that is the island or the circle. And Terry will walk through that with the entire commission so that it'll be very clear. He will also be responding to the stormwater management and pervious paving questions raised by the commission. And we have also added a condition that will enable the planning staff to work with the applicant on the details should the circle move forward. Terry, slide number 3. On this slide, you see the image that you've seen before on the bottom, and that is the transition. And the reason we have that image is to really remind all of us of how we got here. We have several letters of support from the community. We have a letter from Bike AAA, from John Corrin, the president, making specific recommendations, all of which we will be incorporating into the project. And we also have a letter from Mr. Erber, and both Terry Schuman and I will be addressing his comments. But as the commission looks at the public support for this project, it really reflects the very early commitment by the applicant to go out into the community, meet with the neighbors, meet with the adjoining properties. And also we had a widely attended community meeting last October. But I think the most important issue, and this is just for the commission's consideration in the future with projects, is that the applicant and the city work together to redesign the project as your comments and the community's comments came in. The entire project was redesigned, but after it was redesigned last fall, extensive changes were incorporated to reflect what we heard from the commission and from the community and the planning department. We will continue through development and construction to work with the community in the same kind of relationship. Next slide, Terry. As a result of these ongoing, really ongoing efforts, what you have before you tonight is a project that has a compatible land use that is, first of all, in full compliance with the comprehensive plan. It meets, and in most cases exceeds, the plan development and site design requirements, but most importantly, it meets the community expectations and benefits. To respond to one of the letters that we received today, I wanted to borrow from the comp plan language, and that is respect and enhance the character of the surrounding community. This project achieves that, and one of the ways it achieves it is by greatly reducing the visibility of the building itself, but also the visibility of cars, of any lighting on the adjacent properties. It does that, first of all, by Leo relocated the building away from the residences. But then secondly, Deb Schwab put in, there's a retaining wall there, there's an extensive landscaping and the retention of existing forestation. But perhaps most importantly is the building was sited at a significantly lower grade than the adjacent neighbors. Let's go to the next slide. When you look at the next slide, what you see is you see a 4-story building. The first story and the portico share for this building are basically below the level of the adjacent neighbor's street. So what that means is the cars you see there coming through with their lights, any of the activity, that is all below the level, below the grade for the adjacent neighbors. And as you can see, and Leo spent a great amount of detail with all of you at our last meeting, it's not just the siting, so that you basically have a 3-story building, but the articulation and the detail give us a very human scale building. Next slide, please. On this slide, we wanted to respond to the overriding issue in the comp plan, and that is for a sustainable future. Economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, transportation. From an economic standpoint, this site is an underutilized infill site, and the hotel will offer the city the maximum revenue from lodging and property tax, $500,000 a year. From an environmental standpoint, we have a project that currently is on a site that has no stormwater management. This will meet, and in most cases exceed, the stormwater management requirements with a treatment of 98% of the impervious area. But it also, if you recall, from an environmental or visual standpoint, we will be undergrounding the very large BG&E utility line. Next slide, please. The project, one of the most important features is that the project supports basically and improves the transportation network that's envisioned through the comprehensive plan, the bicycle master plan, and the recreation plan. You're going to see in detail in just a moment from Terry, sidewalks, pedestrian activated signals, crosswalks on Taylor, safe connections to Poplar, and very importantly, speed reduction and improved traffic flow through either the circle or the island. And the last slide. So in conclusion, what we would like our position for all of you to consider is that this project will benefit the entire community. It benefits it by investing in Annapolis's future and creating, first of all, a successful transition from residential to commercial, and secondly, a proud gateway. Thanks very much. And I think, Alan, you want to move on to Terry.
I do. Thank you. Thank you, Eileen. So, Mr. Schuman, you recall that at the last hearing, we proposed 2 methods of mitigating traffic, right? We had the island plan, or what I call the alternative plan, or the roundabout or circle, right? You recall that? Terry? Terry, you might be muted.
Give you another minute to get in touch with him unless you want to go over another slide while you.
Well,
yeah.
This is the main event here, so I need to let me try to reach him on his cell. Okay.
Okay. While you're doing that, we'll take a quick minute break here, and I'll ask Alex. Alex, you had an item. You said the email that you're going to want presented on PD 2018-002. I can bring that up for you just to make sure that you know.
Mr. Chair, he is unmuted now.
I'm good. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good. Okay. All right. Did you hear my questions?
I did, yes, there are.
Okay, so we had a couple of options, right? And you recall that.
I do, yes.
And then do you also recall at our July 22nd hearing that when we discussed in particular the alternative plan, there were some concerns raised by members of the Planning Commission with regard to pedestrian safety in particular?
I do recall that, yes.
So since that time, you've prepared 2 revised plans, which we have distributed to the Planning Commission. I would offer them into the record, Mr. Chairman. And we have circulated them. They are on your screen tonight, right? You have them available, right?
They are.
Okay, so
They're on.
so each of those plans has different features, I'll call them, that you have added since July 22nd. And if you would take a couple of minutes for the benefit of the Planning Commission and point out the changes, the amendments, whatever you want to call them, that have been made to those plans to enhance pedestrian and traffic safety. If you would take a few moments to run through that, that would be helpful.
Sure, so as Alan indicated, and I believe you all got advanced copies of these, but what we did is prepare a series of 2 exhibits, one with the roundabout and the circle, and then we put it, we just listed a pedestrian and safety measures. And we did one also for the pedestrian or the intersection plan and listed a series of pedestrian safety measures that were offered by each of these plans. I guess, yes, from the last hearing, there were some concerns, and I'll just want to identify the things that we've changed since our last hearing. And I'll start with this plan, the intersection plan. There was discussion about the flashing beacons. So what we did do on this plan is we just clearly identified that the 2 flashing beacons at the pedestrian crossing would be in both directions. So there was some discussion whether they were just one way and both. So that means anyone traveling from the Naval Academy will see a flashing light. And then as well, coming back from the traffic circle, we'll see a flashing light. So each of these lights will have lights in both directions, just to identify the crossing and provide an extra safety measure in both directions. In addition to these 2 flashing beacons, we added another advanced flashing beacon near the dry cleaners, further south from the pedestrian crossing. So anyone traveling from the traffic circle, the existing Westgate Circle, it'll trip off if anyone goes in the pedestrian crossing, will alert this pedestrian, the flashing beacon, and will go off an advance warning for vehicles that are traveling toward the pedestrian crossing that there is a pedestrian in the crossing itself. So that was an improvement that we made from the last plan, as identified by some of the commissioners. In addition to that, there was also some concern that people would just continue short circuiting, going up and around to the safer pedestrian crossing and going across the street. So what we wanted to identify was that we would put a fence across here and some landscaping, in addition to removing the existing poplar trail that exists today. And we believe that with the fence and the landscaping and the removal, will minimize anyone going across the street, and will bring pedestrians and bikers up to the sufficient and safety crossing that we're providing. Third improvement that we made to this plan, and there was a lot of discussion about the crosswalk across Lowe's Access Road. So what we've done, we work with our traffic consultant, and this is a wide road coming through here, and we were able to shift these striping areas further to the west. We get adequate lane widths, and by doing that, we can then get a protected pedestrian crossing by providing it's a 5-foot wide raised median. So before, we didn't have this raised median type thing. We had the raised median, but the pedestrians were walking over it. Now we are able to pull that out, provide a safety buffer, and the mountable 5-foot wide islands would provide additional safety for any pedestrian coming from the walkway up to the hiker biker trail and then across. So these were the changes that we made, and I just wanted to identify some of all the other safety measures that we were also providing. We are we're taking a 6-foot wide poplar trail, and we're going to provide a 10-foot wide poplar trail across the entrance. In addition, and then around and across the entrance out to Lowe's Access Road. In addition, we will widen that same sidewalk to 10 feet wide across the property frontage. We're also providing raised medians, which provide a refuge for pedestrians that cross the road. It also acts as a traffic calming method for oncoming and traffic approaching the pedestrian crossing. These raised medians will help slow the traffic down. We also going to regrade for better visibility of the sight distance. So a vehicle leaving Lowe's Access Road and turning right onto Taylor Avenue, there's a little bit of a hump in this grade over here, and we will grade that out and give a little better improved safety distance for vehicles entering toward the intersection. In addition, we will provide where it doesn't exist today, but we'll provide a left turn dedicated striped turn into the Lowe's Access Road. And again, it's wide enough where we can get the proper distances for the lanes, the widths of the lanes, and provide a dedicated turn so someone can keep going as someone turns in. In addition, we're restricting left-hand turns out of the Lowe's Access Road. So anyone leaving the Lowe's Access Road will be directed to make a right only, and we'll provide adequate signage and striping to provide that. And then we also have the traffic circle plan with the same pedestrian improvements as well. And I just had a blow up. If you just wanted to see a little blow up of it, this just provides some of the red line. These are the red line changes that we made and I talked about just now.
Can I ask you a quick question about if you go back a slide to the circle plan? So in the circle plan, the cut into the parking lot doesn't have any striping across the trail. Is that just an omission? In the island plan, if you go back one more, it has striping across the so I assume that's just an omission, that the striping would be there in either plan.
And we would provide striping. I mean, the circle plan was an early plan, and then we went to the intersection plan just because, so it was omitted. Yeah,
okay, that's fine.
Certainly would.
Just want to make sure that was just an omission and not something intentional.
Not at all.
So, Mr. Schuman, one item I wanted you to address before we finish up with you. There was some discussion at the last hearing about the volume of asphalt on the site and compared to concrete or even permeable pavers. Could you discuss how all that relates to the site and proposed stormwater plans with regard to this project?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, you all can see the screen, but early in the design, we looked at alternative options for pavements and stormwater options, and we were looking at permeable pavement in this area. But as you can see from the aerials, it's a compacted urban land complex. The soils are very, compacted. They're very little infiltration at all in those soils. So in working with conjunction with DPW and the stormwater management engineer, since we couldn't get permeability on this site as far as permeable pavement goes, we ruled out permeable pavement, but we did replace it with other alternative stormwater options. And again, we treat 98% of the existing impervious, exceeding the redevelopment requirements of 75%. And then for any new development, we treated 125% meeting the city requirements. So we comply with all the city, exceed or meet all the city requirements for stormwater management. We exceed or meet all the requirements for the critical area commission for intensely developed areas as far as the pollutant loadings go. So a combination of that, and I know heat island effect is a big deal, and I know from it, we have an extensive landscape plan with shading and substantial landscaping that we believe will help minimize the heat island effect as much as it can. And so yes, we're not able to do the alternative pavement, but we believe with the stormwater management and extensive landscaping, we've minimized that effect as much as we can.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would call on Ken Schmid, if I could at this time, just to follow up on Mr. Schumann's design. And I would have a couple of questions for him as a traffic consultant. So Mr. Schmid, are you there?
Karen, okay, I'm here.
Great, thanks. So you heard that you were at the last hearing, you testified at the last hearing, and you just observed the changes that Mr. Schumann has designed on these plans, right? You've
Right.
seen it before.
Yes, yeah, we worked with Terry on those.
Yep. Would you take a moment and explain how, in your opinion, if it is your opinion, that these changes satisfy the requirements for both the traffic impact study and the traffic mitigation, as well as the pedestrian safety features? Just explain how these work and how they're better than they were before, if you would.
Yes, as a result of the impact study done by, I believe it was Whitney, Bailey, Cox, and Magnati under the direction of the city, the police station and our access point would have operated with left turn delays above 35 seconds, which is an E-level service and needed to be mitigated. We had some impacts out on the West Street intersection at Spa Road as well, but in discussion with the city, we determined that they're best to concentrate our efforts on this area, this intersection, to both address the vehicle safety and capacity, as well as the pedestrian bike capacity and safety. We heard what the Planning Commission had to say. We actually came up with two different plans. With the circle, we were able to provide full movement access. However, if we can't put the roundabout or circle in, we can't get acceptable left turn delays out of Lowe's Access Road. So in order to meet the APF standard of 35 seconds, we restricted the left turn movements from Lowe's Access Road. All the other movements have been mitigated. The road itself will become much better to drive. It'll be overlaid. It'll be not graded, but crowned. As Terry talked about, we got a lot of pavement out there. We are going to do a little bit of widening up by the crosswalk there to shift traffic over a little bit to get the kind of separation we talked about last hearing. We were able to get about a 6 or 7 foot between the white edge line and the crosswalk. We got about 7 feet of clearance. So there's a clearance area there between the pedestrians and the cars, which wasn't in the previous plan. I think that's a significant improvement and benefit from the Planning Commission comments. There's also has been a rolling comment about people just walking through the intersection, not walking up to the crosswalk. So we tried to, it's not only from Lowe's Access Road, but up from Taylor Avenue from the circle. We devised a plan to put a barrier in the terms of fence, some ornamental shrubs, which we hope will have long, thorny stickers on them, Deb. And hopefully we'll encourage pedestrians to use the provided crosswalk and not cross across the intersection with those type of non-incentives. We added the pedestrian signal heads and for the crosswalk to better highlight the location of the crosswalk and the flashing lights. As Terry talked about, there was this concern about the sight lines approaching from Taylor Avenue from the roundabout from Spa Road up towards the crossing. and that people couldn't see it. I believe once we do our grading, you will be able to see people in the pedestrian crosswalk and up by the ramps to get in. But we agreed to put in a push button activated flasher down on Taylor Avenue near the cleaners to advise people that once somebody presses the button, it'll start flashing and make people aware on Taylor Avenue heading north that someone's in the area of the crosswalk. We added some signing. We're going to put some more signing on the pavements to better clarify the actual turning movement areas like Terry talked about down Lotus Access Road. So I think that either plan works, meets APFO. I think it over mitigates or impacts from pedestrians and bicycles as well, required by code to provide those facilities on site leading out to the public roads. But we've agreed to rebuild a couple of aging sidewalk locations, try to make a much better crossing of the Taylor Avenue with the hiker biker trail and pedestrian crossing there. We have reviewed Mr. Corrin's letter and basically agreed that all the standards will be met in the industry, and when we're doing our sign and marking, we have placed the crosswalk where it has to be by code and by requirements of the Federal Highway Administration. They locate where you put crosswalks in relation to roundabouts and circles, and that's why it's where it's at. I know Mr. Corrin had a little bit of a difficulty with the location, but that's where the traffic engineers tell us that it needs to be designed and located after their many years of trial and error. So all in all, I think we've met the code in terms of mitigation, in terms of mitigating all modes of transportation. And I really hope we can work out something with the roundabout, because I think the roundabout will be a really long-term solution here. But I also believe the interim plan will work in terms of over mitigations as well as capacity. So either option I think meets the code. We've been pretty clear about the option of the roundabout being our favorite.
Thank you, Mr. Schmid. Mr. Chairman, that would conclude our piece of the presentation for this evening. I have the witnesses certainly available for any questioning that you or any members of the Planning Commission may have for them. And, I would respectfully request that the Planning Commission approve this project. It's a good infill project. It's certainly not an attractive site today. What's being proposed is consistent with the comprehensive plan. As you've heard, it's an economic benefit to the city, and most importantly, aesthetically, it's going to be a very pleasing looking project. It looks like it belongs in Annapolis, and there's some features that will make this traffic and pedestrian flow much more safely than what's going on today. So thank you for your time and indulgence.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hyatt, Mr. Schuman. Before we get into Commissioner feedback and bounce back and forth with you, I want to go over a little bit of procedure here. We had our first public hearing opened on this item on July 22nd. The public has had time to comment from now until then. And normally we would have a finalized package to us without modification. Now that the package has been modified and these modifications presented just now, I do believe that would then make this item not be able to be approved tonight due to public comment still being needed, because the public has just been made aware of this item. Of course, posted online through the eTrack website and added to our files. But as far as public hearing and open comment to that, I believe they're just presented with it tonight. So therefore, as a procedure, we wouldn't be able to vote finally on this tonight, and we would have to continue this item again to the next meeting. But our next meeting is actually in another 2 weeks or shortly thereunder. We might want to actually make that go to the next meeting in September, because we will have 2 in September. So I just want to get the procedures right. Are there any other commissioners that have comments with regard to that procedure? Because we do have some former chairmen that are on the commission at this moment. Any advisement? Anybody else comment?
I'm comfortable with that. I think that we should have a full discussion tonight. And then if that's the ruling, then it's only 2 weeks, and then we can hopefully make it very quick next time. There will be no need for the applicant to present testimony, for instance. But I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, so you're thinking more along the lines of hear it at the next meeting, not 2 meetings from now. So that'd be 2 weeks.
Yeah, September 3rd is fine with me. I think that we should have a full discussion tonight, and even to the extent of what conditions we might propose, so that it would be very efficient on September the 3rd.
Okay, so that, in my mind, that falls in line with correct procedure. Anything else from the commissioners or our own commission legal representation, Mr. Beard, have any comments to that?
No, I think that's appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Then can I just ask either Mr. Braithwaite or Mr. Beard, if you vote on it on the 3rd, is that a problem since you will not be there? And then there would only be 4 of the members who are here tonight, since David isn't here.
David Iams is not here right now. So you would be down to a non-quorum at that point on the 3rd. So it would actually have to be the following meeting.
Jesus Christ.
If that's an issue, or can they just go ahead and vote even if it's not, assuming David comes to the meeting, he just wouldn't vote?
Well, let me retract what I said before. Given that complication, what I'm saying here are not major modifications to what was proposed before. I mean, it's essentially some changes in the alignments of sidewalks. It's the addition of some flashers. It's a few things which I think are not major modifications. And if my colleagues are comfortable moving forward tonight and actually coming up with conditions in a vote, I would be too, because I don't know that these amendments constitute major modifications.
I agree.
I'll be in our procedure. There's nothing written to define that as far as
Right.
it's all it would be as defined as we think it, or our legal representation advises us whether it is or not. Mr. Beard, do you have any comments regarding that?
No, I think you can move forward tonight with a full discussion and as it's presented, a vote.
And the amendments not being so major as to not require a public comment period.
Right, and they've been given adequate notice for tonight's presentation as well to the public.
But they're not allowed to make public comment against these new items. But the items are minor in nature, as Mr. Baldwin alludes to. Mr. Hyatt, do you know of any reason you could not wait till the 23rd, I believe, which would be the 4th Wednesday in September? Or is it or do we meet in the 30th of September? I believe it's the 23rd.
23rd.
23rd. So that'd be the 23rd or the 3rd. Those are the 2 options we're talking about right now. The 3rd being in another week and change, and 23rd being 3 weeks after that. Mr. Hyde?
Mr. Chairman, I can't think of any reason why you couldn't vote on it tonight. I mean, it's not unusual to have changes made all throughout a process, and it's not like we've come up with new concepts. There were 2 options proposed all through this process, you know, the circle plan and the island plan, and we just added a few features, you know, pedestrian enhanced features. So I would, and I think Mr. Beard agrees, I don't think there's any need to delay, and you know, can we wait to the next meeting? We could, but we would rather not, because this has really been a lengthy affair up to this point in time. And so, you know, my request would be that you proceed with your deliberations tonight.
Thank you for your opinion, Mr. Hyatt. And Mr. Beard, I believe you already stated you're okay with us voting on this tonight if we come to that conclusion. Any other commissioner comments? Any comments from the staff? Okay, well, we'll proceed on with the questions and answers portion of this. Any other commissioners have questions regarding the changes that we were just briefed? Please ask them now, and I have some to ask after you're done.
I have a question. It's really for Terry. Do you know what the soil type is for the area on which this project sits?
Yeah, you can hear me, right? Just give me 1 second. These are all, like I said before, Annapolis urban land complexes. They're all D soils.
B, did you say as in boy?
D as in dog.
D as in dog, okay. And then my other question is, did you talk to the city stormwater engineer about the prospect of using permeable concrete or permeable pavers?
A lot, yes, very much a lot.
And does he concur that because of the compact nature of the soil and that there are D soils, that in fact having permeable concrete or permeable pavers would not? And
I pushed very hard to get permeable pavement.
Mhm.
There's a little bit of a difference of opinion between me and him on it, but he is dead set against allowing us to do permeable pavement. So we tried.
Okay, great. And then the other question I have, it was came to my attention just by reading the comments from Rick Ebner or let's see what's his name, Rick Erber, and I thought we had dealt with this, but now I'm not sure. There will be a sidewalk that connects from the crosswalk in front of the hotel up to the Naval Academy Stadium, correct?
No. No.
No, there'll be a side. I mean, do you see the screen? You do, right?
I do.
We have a sidewalk connection, and we have frontage sidewalk that connects up to the existing sidewalk along Taylor Avenue. So,
well, there's an existing kind of minimal sidewalk, but being that there's going to be a new, residential community right there called Terrapin Station, was there any coordination with Terrapin Station to make sure there is a sidewalk on the western side that would connect these communities to the Naval Academy? Because after all, we're serving the Naval Academy, so I would expect the patrons from the Naval Stadium that are there for games, so they'll hopefully walk back and forth to the stadium. So wasn't there any thought given to having a
thought in that
serve that purpose?
the Terrapin Station provided sidewalks to their property line. We will connect that sidewalk to the trail on the west side of Taylor Avenue. But the Terrapin Station, if you look at my screen there, and I can blow it up, they're providing a little curb return on a sidewalk, and that's all they're providing.
Oh, wow. So that's pretty insufficient in my mind. If there's one public benefit that you could give us right now, would be to work with Terrapin Station to make sure there is a nice wide connection between your hotel and the Naval Academy Stadium. I'm sorry, I thought that this was already in the works and was done. And it wasn't until I just read the comments from Mr. Erber that it came back to my attention. He says, we would like to see a more comprehensive plan integrating pedestrian flow to the funded, constructed areas by both developers. Such gesture of goodwill for the benefit of the communities in which they are building will speak volumes to their commitment to the community. And Eileen is very much aware of public benefits and how we really need to start building them into these developments. And so maybe it's not too late for Eileen and the team to readdress this, because I do think it would be an important gesture, and for safety purposes, it would be a good idea.
Alan, if I could respond to
weigh in. Go ahead. Do you want to explain about the financial contribution that we're making?
Yeah, and you can follow what I wanted to say, Diane. What the applicant agreed to do was make a very significant contribution, financial contribution, to the city. And then out of that contribution, there would be improvements. This is in addition to everything you see. Everything you see that Terry has laid out and Ken has laid out is going to be built. In addition to that, the applicant, if the circle did not go forward, proffered a sizable amount of money to the city. Out of that, there would be improvements. The city could make improvements. The applicant, my understanding, but Alan can address this perhaps better than I can, is that this is someone else's land. The applicant has proffered money to the city. The city theoretically, if they wanted that sidewalk and could not get it from Terrapin, could build some of it out of the money that the applicant has proffered. But the applicant is not in a position to go and build something on someone else's land. Alan, is that a fair summation?
That's right. Part of the APF requirement is that there be this financial contribution, and the idea was that it would go toward sidewalks. But in order to install sidewalks, there's several parcels between the Terrapin Station and Cedar Park Road that would have to agree that the sidewalks could be installed on their property.
And Mr. Hyde, did anyone approach those property owners to see if they would agree?
Diane, hold on a second. This is the chairman. I got to step out for about 3 or 4 minutes. So like a small amount.
We didn't do that. I don't know if the city did or not, but we contributed money, or will have money contributed that will go toward the construction of those sidewalks.
Can you tell me the amount of money that you plan to contribute?
I think it was $25,000. I'd have to take a look because, you know, it's based on so much per lineal foot of the sidewalk. I think that's what it was.
Alan, it was $20,000, and that was an estimate of.
That's for the sidewalk. This is Eileen. In addition, there was a large amount of money if the circle did not go forward that would go to the city, but the amount that the sidewalk would cost was $20,000 to $25,000.
That's right. It was estimated at $20,000 to connect from the end of what Terrapin, what is it called? Terrapin
Station. Yeah.
Station
to
is
Cedar Park.
Cedar Park.
So Sally, you think that $20,000 is an appropriate amount to build that sidewalk? And you think that the money is going to be dedicated for that? It's just that we're not requiring the developers to do it. That money won't be diverted to another project by DPW? Is it earmarked for this? I guess is what I'm saying.
It is, the purpose of the money is to fund acquisition of right-of-way and construct the sidewalk for that section of Taylor Avenue.
Okay, thanks.
So while we're on this subject, what are there conditions to this financial contribution?
So Bob, it is in their adequate public facilities mitigation plan. It's attachment D. And there are no conditions on that particular one that I see. Just that the developer shall fund the acquisition of right-of-way and construction of the sidewalk. They provide the pedestrian activated signal, and that they provide a clear connection for the extension of Poplar Trail while in cooperation with the Department of Public Works. Those are their non-auto transportation adequate public facility requirements.
Okay, and that's in either event, Island or Circle.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And is the amount specified in the attachment?
Yes, in attachment D.
B or D?
D as in dog.
D as in dog, and it says 25, up to maximum of 25?
No, it says $20,000.
20. Okay. 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 Thank you. That's all the questions I have on that subject. If there's nobody else, let me kind of jump in, and I think Ben is off for a second here. My first question is actually, as you might not be surprised, I have a string of questions, but my first one is actually for Mr. Hyatt. And I would ask him to look at page 2 of the cover letter that he sent with these 2 drawings briefly. It's a letter dated August 18th. And look on page 2 and the last of the bullet points at the top. It says there shall be no left turn coming from Taylor onto Lowe's Access Road. I think there's simply a mistyping here. There should be no left turn coming onto Taylor.
That's correct.
Correct? Thank you.
You're 100% correct. New left turn coming out of Lowe's Access Road.
Whoever is in charge of the evidence on this, and perhaps Mr. Hyatt, you do that, and you would send it to Ms. Hook or through Dr. Nash or Mr. Smith to see that that is corrected, because I think it's going to become part of the record, and I want to make sure that that's clear, okay?
Yes, sir. I'll take care of it.
Following up on that same topic, which is left turn lanes out of the access road in the event of the island plan. Let me see if I can understand what is there to prevent or provide a sufficiently negative enforcement here to stop left turn lanes out of the access road. What is there to stop people or delivery trucks from just veering in between those 2 islands and making a left? Mr. Schmid, Mr. Schuman?
Can I get up?
What is to prevent or provide a significant negative reinforcement to making left turns coming out of the access road?
Other than the signing we can do within the public right of way, signing and marking that's about all we can do within the public right of way.
Uh-huh.
Well, and plus that we have a mountable curb and it's nosed in the proper direction, so it hopefully restricts someone from turning left.
So the mountable curb, the northern of those 2 little islands there, right? To what extent can that be extended or expanded further into that, the right-hand lane on Lowe's Access Road?
Further here, right? Further in this.
Oh, no, the other end. Yeah, can it be extended further out, further in?
Probably could. We just have to run cars to make sure the vehicles don't have to, at least the cars don't have to run over the mountable curb.
Okay.
We don't want to make it too narrow that they do it really slow and wind up getting hit, but we could look at making that a little bit longer. Because,
the more difficult you make that left turn out, the more attractive that island looks to the Graduate Hotel.
Right.
Thank you. What would you call that little island that we just put our attention to?
Well, it's a half of a pork chop island. Pork chop islands are they're called pork chop islands where you have them in right turn lanes, where you force right turns. They're called pork chops. But
so we're going to call this the Northern Pork Chop Island.
Yes.
It's going to go down in history. Pork Chop Island, okay, can be extended to the maximum extent possible. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, when we get to conditions, I'm just
okay,
because there are no real conditions in the staff report. Okay. Now, if I could, Mr. Schuman, and both of you, I want to applaud you for the installation of a third pedestrian activated signal further down the Taylor Avenue, further down the hill towards West Street. I have my fingers crossed that it can be connected by, I don't know, Bluetooth or radio or something, rather than you're having to run a line. Although I do note that you're changing the sidewalk, so maybe you can do that at the same time. That's up to you, but I really applaud you for that. What I question is its placement. I am not a traffic engineer, but it just common sense and my intuition tells me that it might be better placed if it were further up the hill rather than so far down the hill. Although I could already cast the arguments in both ways, but I would really like you to consider the efficacy of putting it further up the hill. I know.
We can look at that. It really is based on speed. And
Okay,
what the speed is, you put it back from where you're trying to warn of the crossing. So, but I think we could move it up the hill a little bit more here from this.
I just think it should be placed in its most, in its best place. And it just strikes me as it's way down the hill. Somebody's coming up, they see that flashing light, they don't see anything around, you know what I mean? Whereas, okay, so just, that's the one thought, the third light placement.
And we will have a sign on that, on those light standards that talk
Yes,
about
I understand that.
crosswalk advanced 200 feet or whatever.
I understand that. And it becomes a little difficult though, because if we approve this according to the drawings which have been submitted, I don't want this to be necessarily set in concrete, whereas I want other things to be set in concrete. Okay.
And if I can follow up on that, Bob, that just for Mr. Schmid, that I think that the spot that Bob's referring to, there happens to be a no parking sign, which I think would be on the hill. Is a good reference point for where just intuitively it feels right.
Okay.
Yep. So give that a thought.
Okay. If I could move along to while we're actually focused on the Taylor Avenue, I would I'm not clear if there's been any changes. I mentioned last time that I was very concerned about the sidewalk coming up the hill and how close it is to the street. And now that I hear you're going to be doing some regrading, and it's hard for me to tell from the drawings what the distance is between the curb and the sidewalk at its narrowest point. Mr. Schuman, perhaps you can help me with that?
If you see my cursor, are you talking about in this area right here, or are you talking about up along?
Yes, no, where you had it at first.
Yeah, it's the current buffer that's out there now, which is probably around 2 feet.
Are you going to be grading or doing anything further down that way?
We're really grading, if you're familiar with the area, right? That it's really this area up in here.
Okay, how expensive would it be to relocate that sidewalk 5 feet from the curb?
Just money. It's not an exorbitant amount of money.
I think that it was built in the beginning too close to the curb. It's a detail that escaped us when we approved Park Place, and it's something that I would really like. Personally would like to see it moved off 5 feet. I mean, it's really close to the road. It's very uncomfortable. Okay.
Okay.
What would we call that sidewalk? Taylor Avenue sidewalk.
Buffer.
I
don't want it to be confused with the Taylor Avenue sidewalk over the top of the hill.
Be called a grass buffer.
But what do we call that stretch? Taylor Avenue sidewalk, access road to West Street.
Southeast side.
Okay. 5 foot buffer. Okay. All right. If I could move on, I want to applaud you for several of the things that you've done, which I think are excellent. I would make a suggestion that you consider not only a fence, which at the potential shortcut for the path, that you consider not only a fence at Taylor Avenue, but you also consider a fence that runs right alongside the path. It need not be, a major fence. It could be that same kind of a post and rail that's even up there now. Need not be expensive, but I do think that as much as possible to divert people from trying to make the shortcut. And I applaud Ms. Schwab's choice of probably pyracantha or rose bushes or something, that'll stop people from coming through. But as long as, if we have to live with this 25-foot distance or however many feet it is, this diversion, I think we really need to make the point clear. So I'm gonna suggest and move that there be an additional fence along the pathway. Is that?
And I guess, Bob, just look at the cursor, right? So we were proposing a fence along Poplar. I probably didn't explain that. well.
Oh, I missed that. I thought you said only along Taylor.
No, I might have said that, but I should have clarified that we were providing a fence here along Poplar. So
Okay, what are you doing on Taylor? What do I see there?
just really just along thorn bushes and landscaping. But we could put a little split rail fence or something up along there.
Yeah, you don't, make the
As long as you put
point.
it off the road. As long as you put it back a few feet.
Right.
Yes, and rose bushes and pyracantha, so. Okay, Mr. Schuman, thank you for clarifying that. Next point is, who will be responsible for maintaining the lights and this landscaping here across the road and those, those are the two most important items. And striping, I guess, over the years. Who's responsible for this sort of thing? Is the landscaper going to be responsible?
Typically, the city is.
Excuse me?
Typically, the city is. Once we build it and it's accepted for maintenance from a locality, they take over maintenance.
So
and
you're,
responsibility.
so over to the left, the triangular part over there, you're going to be deeding that over to the city for Parks and Rec to take care of?
I believe so.
Well, I can tell you that they will cut the grass, but they will do absolutely nothing about these bushes that you put in. So that needs to be thought through as to who's going to take care of it. If you're going to deed it over to the city for this, that's what's going to happen. Nothing other than grass cutting. I think that the landscaping needs to be looked at. That landscaping needs to be looked at very carefully so that we don't get stuck with a mess 2 years, 3 years away. Okay.
Okay.
And the lights will be maintained by DPW or somebody?
Yeah. Yes, they maintain. I think there's a few lights in the city they maintain that are
Okay.
city.
Okay. And I assume you'll coordinate with them in terms of brand and manufacturer and so forth and so on.
We'll have to design them for their approval and use their vendors and such. And then once we
That's
turn it,
fine. That's great. Now, just as a side comment, I don't envision anything near what State Highway Administration put in at the library. They
No.
so overbuilt that thing that it's ridiculous, and they kind of ruined the view of the
Yeah.
library itself.
you don't like that big pole going across the road?
Excuse me?
You don't like that big pole going across the road?
I don't like the big pole going, and nor do I the electrical boxes that are connected with it. The whole
Yeah.
thing. It's just
Yeah.
way, and I don't think it's as effective as the brightly flashing LED lights that are at about 8 or 10 feet above, ground, which are the simplest and the most sophisticated and the most effective to install. So that's what I hope gets installed.
Yes.
Now, if I could move, Mr. Schuman, if you could give us either of the slides.
Hey, Bob, can I interject something first?
What?
If you're going to vote on this, you certainly want to achieve clarity of responsibility. And you've
I'm
just,
making notes, Mr. Beard. I'm making notes, and I'll make suggestions as to conditions. I'll move
Okay.
several conditions, okay? Yeah, no, I got you. This is not just a handshake agreement.
all right.
Thanks for reminding all of us. The comments from the neighbor, I thought were very well taken and very well spoken. And he's rightly, I think, concerned about lights leaching into him, probably his bedroom, you know, from cars coming in to the porte cochere, you know, at night. And to me, there seem to be two potential solutions. One of them is to reroute the flow of traffic so that it's clockwise. I don't know that that works, but the second solution might be to actually build a fence along the boundary that will actually be light, you know, whatever, light reflective or light opaque. I know that you were planning on doing some fencing. It may be that, and when I learned tonight that from Ms. Fogarty that the first floor of this structure is actually lower than the neighbors to the north, it occurred to me that a fence could be very effective at a fairly inexpensive price. Do I get any comments from the applicant on that?
Bob, this is Eileen. Let me just say what you've got, and Deb Schwab did a drawing that I don't think we have it in a situation to put it up, but basically, if you can think about this, the cars are below the property of the neighbor's property, since you've got a 7 or 8 foot lower grade. So the entire car, including their lights, are lower than the adjacent property. Then you add to that the retaining wall, and you add to that the buffer. And, you know, maybe Deb or Terry want to, or Leo want to go expand this, but they spent a great amount of time making sure that there is no light from the car that would be seen in the neighbor's property.
So there's it says fence wall. What is that?
That's a wall. So
This is Deb. There's a 4-foot fence on top of the wall.
Okay.
And then there's planting from the fence to the property line. So there's several levels of things going on. If you look at that little diagram.
Yeah. That's
From
very
this side view, it actually looks like the first and second level of the hotel are not below grade, as was briefed earlier.
Well, if you look at where the neighbor's house is, and this is kind of a compressed scale, the finished floor of the hotel is about anywhere from 3 to 3.5 feet below the elevation at the base of the neighbor's house, which is around.
It was
30,
briefed that floor
which is
1
around
and
30.
2 of the hotel were below the grade of the adjoining property.
The existing grade at the houses is around 36, and the proposed finished floor of the hotel is 32 point something.
And the lowest grade of the houses on that street is 36, correct?
The backside facing the hotel, I don't know what their finished floors are. I just know what the grade is at the backs of their houses, which is around 36.
So that's the lowest grade of all those houses, right?
That's the one.
But just
I can't point. Terry, you can point to the one where I did the section.
Can I just interject for a couple of
Sure.
This is Mr. Erber's house right here.
Okay.
There's another residential house here. This is Heidler's Plumbing Supply.
Oh.
So the house that wrote the letter is this house.
Uh-huh.
And we did early on, if you way long time ago, this was our entrance to the hotel. And when we brought Leo on, and one of the first things Leo did was move the porte cochere here. We do the right in. That's just a typical traffic flow for that.
Sure.
Drop off of visitors. But when we did that, we also extended the wall. We do have a grade differential, and just for sake of distance, the point of the house to the porte cochere is about 160 feet. And it is, as we said before, this elevation is probably about 5.5 feet higher than the first floor of the hotel. So yes, the back of the house where you step out, or approximately the first floor of the rear floor elevation when you look out, is about 5.5 feet higher than the first floor of the hotel. But
and how high is the wall along the retaining wall?
So it's
or the fence, pardon me. How high is the fence on top of there?
So the wall is approximately 2 feet. It starts at 0 and it goes up, at probably 3 or 4 feet in the middle, but around this area right here, 2
Could
feet
you
high.
zoom into that area a little more so? We don't need the bottom half of the drawing, maybe more than top half. That'd be a little clearer. And just go right. Thank you.
Again, the subject letter house and this. So this wall in this area right here is about 2 feet high. And then on
Yeah.
top of that wall, we have a 4-foot high fence. And then what we did, so we extended the wall for that purpose where the portico share was and the headlights to help screen that. We also heavily screened with evergreens and shrubs and not just shade trees there that didn't have any vegetation below the branches. So we tried to heavily screen this for that purpose. So
Okay. And there's a 4-foot fence above the retaining wall.
yes, that's correct.
So there's a total of 6, but at a distance from the porte cochere. I would think I would just think a little bit higher than that would be better on that whole side. But after that fence, to the north of that fence, you've got the green space and then property line. So at the property line, what else is there?
Vegetation. I mean, it's
Just vegetation, no additional fencing.
none planned as of right now. No.
What kind of fence is on top of this retaining wall?
I mean,
Have you thought about that?
Deb, you could answer. I was thinking something a little more decorative and not a board on board. I mean, I just think a more decorative.
Well, we don't have an exact detail yet, but it would be a screen type fence.
What
When
does
you're
that mean?
trying to block light, it wouldn't be an open fence. And trying to put a fence along the property line
No,
is
you don't
a
need
little
that.
difficult because some of the neighbors already have fence on the property line, and there's also existing trees that we're saving on the property line.
What would a 5-foot fence do?
Reach 2
It's
foot.
1 foot above 4.
It would hide all the landscaping that we have going on.
Okay.
I would just think higher is better in that regime. But if you guys have looked at it and you feel otherwise, especially when you have 2 feet below the adjacent property. I don't want to go over you, Mr. Waldman. I want to let you finish first before I do my comment.
No, actually, I think that I'm done. I'm done. I appreciate your patience.
Any other commissioners with comments? Okay, I have some questions here regarding to Mr. Schuman regarding the pavement. I know you already talked to Ms. Butler about the pavers and how that was looked into and not wanted, but why not concrete versus asphalt? I know there's cost, but when you look at the heat sink properties of it, when you look at the lack of need for recoating with new asphalt coating surfaces every couple of years, why not? It seems to be the more viable, environmentally friendly thing to do. However, not required by our code, but seems to be a more environmentally friendly thing to do. Can you give me a thought process why you guys chose asphalt over concrete?
I think we, like I said before, we went above and beyond the stormwater, and I think we were just kind of funneling our efforts to stormwater and for landscaping. And, we're trying to balance everything, and, stormwater and landscaping were a big thing. And we tried with the permeable pavement. And I mean, I think we just have a quality stormwater plan. And I guess we put our efforts there more, and cost is a, with the additional landscaping and the additional, well, not the landscape, but the stormwater, we've added costs there. And I guess we've put our finances there as opposed to the alternative pavement.
So concrete, reducing your need for lighting at night, reducing the amount of heat that is maintained by the pavement and then radiated at night, making it a very hot parking lot during the summertime. We don't have anything in our code that stops you from putting asphalt. I can't say that, but I mean, I have to say from a design perspective, if I own the property, I would definitely go with concrete vice asphalt, just for the heat perspective, let alone the pollution perspective of the need to recoat it. I've just seen it too much. And I know you have the stormwater management procedures in place, but the slow leaching of asphalt over time off of these pavements, I've seen it a lot on West Street on properties done near Spot Creek, actually, even the old school buildings. And it's quite disheartening. So I know there's a chance to change it, but also the lighting. And since you have asphalt, you will need a decent amount of lighting. I wanted to go over the lighting on the north side of the property that abuts the residential area. I know you've got a lot of trees that are going to stop some of that lighting. Can you tell me how high those light poles will be and where they'll be located? And also, will there be lighting on top of the building pointing down towards the north side?
Yeah, so from a lighting standpoint, you can see these darker rectangles. These are the tall light poles, right, with the downward lighting. Up along the residential area and along this area, those lights will be, Deb, you can weigh in. I think they're 3.5 to 4 foot high, just kind of pedestrian lights, not.
Yeah, those are what we call bollard lights. More typical to what you'd see along walkways. You've probably seen them, kind of waist height lights with, and the fixtures on them are meant to light down as opposed to up.
Okay, is there any lighting on the top of the building facing the green space between the building and the northern road?
That's for Leo.
Deb, I can answer that. We don't have any building mounted light shown on the design right now. I don't anticipate a need for it. We try and handle the lighting in accordance with LEED guidelines, which says that we should light the surface and not the area around it. So most of the lighting on the building, if necessary, would be down at around the 8 foot mark.
Okay, because that's one thing I've seen at a lot of hotels recently over the last month, just taking a look, and you see them putting lighting on the structure pointing down around it completely. I wouldn't want that on the north side by the residences. I love the fact that you have bollard lighting down on the surface. That sounds great. But I just want to make it known that lighting on top of the building pointing down, I understand the security reasons and whatnot, but I wouldn't want to see that extra luminosity going into the neighbors' houses, kind of preserve some of that. And I also know there's trees there and you're preserving a lot of those. It's great, but the less lighting on the north side, seemingly to me, the better, but there is the security concern. Okay, so I've asked my asphalt question. I've asked my lighting question. On to my third one I have here. And on top of the building, I don't see where it's shown in the drawings for elevation. If you were looking for me, the neighbors, if you have your utilities on top of the building, of course, you're going to have air conditioning units and whatnot, I would think, up there. Is that correct, on top of the roof? Or are you going to have your air conditioning units and supporting in stuff on the side of the building?
No, the intent would be to put the mechanical units on the roof of the building. And we've gone through this downtown with 110 Compromise and other structures we've been involved with, where if we locate the units in the more central area of the building, the view access to those units is non-existent. You really can't get a view of the roof of the building from anywhere nearby. So really it's about just making sure they're located correctly in the center of the building. So I think we can do that without trouble.
You went right into what I was going to ask. It was where you were going to put those. And obviously you will need an access to the roof to get to those. Some note has been mentioned to me by people about the Bozzuto development across from the West End Hotel. And they have the stairwells that come out on top of the roof and the roof access up there, which detracts from the look downtown, and it really doesn't look good. In my opinion, and I wanted to avoid the same thing here. I think you have a wide enough structure to easily avoid that by putting them in the middle or towards us, in the middle of the building, obviously.
You'll see that same type of penetration through the roof plane for the elevator typically. Again, that's been located centrally, so it's not adjacent to an exterior wall. And on those townhouses, the access to the roof is for people to get up there for entertaining and whatnot. And so that's a full stairway. In this case, we'll have a roof scuttle that goes up through one of the stair towers. So, or one of the mechanical spaces. So that's really just a flat hatch. There won't be a visible kind of angled piece that shows a stair like the ones you see downtown.
Has there been any thought to greening some portions of the roof up there, or is there any? Obviously I don't think there's any public access to the roof to go up there. Is there? There's no plan.
No, just from safety concerns, we wouldn't put anybody up on the roof. We've looked at green roofs before for projects like this. The reality is that they require routine care that is, it's onerous for people to take care of those roofs. I think some people might disagree, but I find it's far better to do that type of stuff down at grade where we can make sure that it not only helps with the green, but also is something that we can enjoy and keep serviceable. The rooftop gardens are nice if there's a portion of the building that goes beyond that it can enjoy it. But other than that, we like to stay away from them.
What type of roof surface are you going to do? Are you going to cover that roof surface in any aggregate?
No, the aggregate program is one that we're not fond of. We use a TPO system, which really looks like a membrane. It's usually 60 mil thick. In accordance with LEED guidelines, they ask us to not use the black any longer. So we use a gray. The white's hard to keep looking good, but the gray is really serviceable, gives us a long-term roof and helps with our heat island effect. Again, it's a point we need to achieve LEED certification, which will be a requirement for the project in accordance with the city guidelines.
How does the parking lot being asphalt work into that LEED certification? What's the LEED recommendations for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's really about the calc for that and whether or not there's enough area to facilitate the change to concrete. Look, we look at it both ways. Asphalt is tried and true. We've had problems with concrete drives in the past. If we come up against a point where we can't meet the LEED certification requirements with the asphalt, then we'd have to look at another way to do it.
Do you already meet the LEED certification requirements with asphalt?
Well, we don't know yet. I mean, it's kind of a laborious exercise to calc it. So we wanted to get past site design review and then figure out what we need to do to achieve that LEED certification.
Is that a necessity that you have to meet that LEED certification, or do you not have to?
It is in the city code. Any building over a certain square footage is required to maybe not get LEED certification, but be what they call LEED certifiable, which means you have to demonstrate to the building office that you can successfully comply with the guidelines under LEED. You're not asked to provide the certification from LEED because it's costly, but you have to demonstrate to Ryan Blomley that you are able to do so.
And what I'm walking you to is it's for the general public that may be watching us on YouTube right now or watch us later. If we approve a project, it's got a lot of asphalt here, it's got a big building, people worry about the environment. There's other things there that people really don't focus in on, which is a lot of green area. There's mitigation for runoff that we've never had before. There's also other mitigating areas. And when when you're forced by the city to be LEED accessible, qualifiable, what does that really mean to the general public for environmentally friendliness of the design as a whole? Can you explain that just under general terms, please?
Sure. So leadership in energy and environmental design is LEED is the acronym for that. And what is involved is essentially a checklist, if you will, of things that you can do to improve the kind of sensitivity of the building to how it absorbs resources from the earth, essentially. So they ask us to evaluate energy performance of the building, taking into account where the windows are and the thermal envelope you create for the building. So it goes from the interior to building systems, and then to the exterior, there's check marks for connectivity. Is there a bus station close by? Is it walkable? Can I get to amenities on foot? Do I have parking spaces for energy efficient vehicles like electric cars? Do I provide adequate handicapped accessibility at multiple points around the building? That's kind of an overlap with the ADA guidelines. But the idea is to go through this checklist and take a look at what you're doing to improve your impact on the environment. Now, on a site like this, really, this is what I would call infill development, because it's in an urban area that really hasn't done anything to deal with things like stormwater and runoff, those types of things. And there's really not much green there. So part of trying to secure this site design plan review approval is a negotiation or a discussion on design features with planning and zoning office. And they ask us routinely to make sure we're doing, kind of not just a little bit, but quite a bit to comply with those guidelines, which lines right up with LEED certification and critical area commission requirements for, impact on the bay.
Okay, thank you very much for that. As a brief description to the public on the LEED certification, what that means. And environmentally, it means a whole lot versus the way we used to do developments. It adds in a lot. As a whole, it's a holistic view, a point of trying to make a design that's better for the environment as a whole. And when you look at this design, people may not think automatically, oh, that's not great for the environment. It might be the first reaction, but if you really look into it, there's a lot of things done to mitigate that. I'm still not a fan of asphalt, but even though it's more expensive, it's just so hot and I deal with it on a daily basis. On another thing, and I think this will go to maybe Terry, I might be wrong on this one, but if we didn't approve a hotel right here, if we shot this down, this property, could this property turn into condo development or townhomes later on? And how many townhomes could you build on this? I'm trying to I just want to give the community and other people out there a viewpoint of, if you didn't have this, what would you have? What could be put there otherwise? And are you shooting down something and then you end up with something way worse later, or vice versa in their viewpoint? So as far as residential townhomes or condos, how many could you throw on this property, and could you do it?
Yeah, again, this was part of the planned development as well for the whole Park Place, but it's R2, R4, and I don't know offhand, yeah, R2, R4, you could have residential development there. I don't know how many.
You could probably, I'm looking at that, trying to equate that to other properties that we've approved for, and I'm seeing somewhere at least greater than 35 or 40. I'm thinking townhomes.
You're probably right, a multifamily or something, yes.
Yes. So looking at it from a neighborhood perspective, since I live in a neighborhood, half mile down the street, a hotel doesn't mean you have a ton of condos being built or townhomes with people rolling in and out all hours of the day, multiple cars, which I think would be a worse traffic scenario, and also more noisy. I hate to say it, but hotels seem to be quieter events where people are just coming back to go to bed, especially this one. This one doesn't seem to have the massive area that you would need to throw a big party at or a wedding. It's more of like just a place to go sleep. So if you want to look at the possible options, this or something else on this type of property, my personal opinion is it could be way busier and way worse. I don't like the asphalt. I'll say that again and again. I think we could be a little bit more environmentally friendly. There's some other things maybe in there, but the lighting worries me when these structures get built, the brightness, the luminosity that goes on the neighbors' properties. Also in the front of the hotel, I think it could be done right, and it doesn't look to me in the design that the luminosity is going to really blare out onto Taylor Avenue and across the street. So I hope you guys got it right. And I think you do from what I'm looking at the plan. But the lighting was my concern. I think you've mitigated that. The pavement, you have to have parking spots. You got to pave it with something. I'd rather see concrete. But on the rooftop, the facility management type items, air conditioners, whatnot, those will be mitigated to the center of the building. That's good. And then finally, what structure could be put there otherwise? I think could be something that will be way busier and not as friendly to the residential community, I'll be honest with you. And I just hope the public realizes that. Any other, that's done with my comments. Any rebuttal from the applicant or his reps? Okay, fantastic. Moving on to any other comments from the commissioners before I enter in the public comment and display that real quick for Mr. Herbert.
I have-
Ben, I just want to just add to what you were saying about concrete. If we had some idea of what the differences in the cost would be between concrete and asphalt, that would be good. But just knowing that the developers don't want to use concrete because it's more expensive doesn't sit well with me. So I do think we should think about that some more. I also had a question about solar on the rooftop. If you're not going to do a green roof, would you consider making the rooftop available for solar?
Well, Diane, Commissioner Butler, it's a good question. What we see happen oftentimes is people can lease the rights to use the roof to companies that want to install solar. Again, it's about what's left over there for us to actually do up there. I've got to put the mechanical equipment up there. We have not been finding solar to be financially effective for clients unless it's subsidized somehow by government programs that provide some type of incentive to do it. So, could we do it? Sure, it's a possibility. The reality is that unless the economics work at the time this is actually built, it's hard to say whether or not that's going to make sense for the owner.
But Mr. Wilson, are you going to build it in a way that solar is an option?
Oh, sure. Yeah, the TPO roof product that I described earlier is one where we can easily attach things to the roof through the membrane and make it watertight. So certainly the possibility, should someone decide they want to go ahead and do that, can be accommodated.
Okay, I've got one more thing to point out to the public here and to make sure. So the modifications to the plan from since our last meeting, in a basic way, the number one is no longer.
Ben, can I interrupt for a sec? Before you start to summarize, so I'd like to bring up a new topic.
Okay, what's your new topic? We still have to get the comment from Mr. Herbert displayed. So should we do that first or yours?
Well, I think just to continue on with the discussion of commissioner comments, I think.
Okay.
So I prepared a little document with a visual to share. So
would you like me to show that, or are you going to show that?
I can share it.
Go ahead. Thank you. You got the floor.
Okay. So the thing I wanted to bring up is with respect to the easement on the south side of the property. So currently in the plan, there's an easement for the trail that runs essentially a little bit past. I can show in the visual here. It runs a little bit past the curb cut into the park to the property. So the thing that I wanted to mention was, in our experience with working with the city and the county in implementing their bike master plans, most of the implementation of that kind of thing is retrofits in the built environment. And the biggest challenge is that there's often no right of way to do that. So you have to spend a lot of money to buy right away, if you can even do that. Because there are very few easements available. And, as we've experienced a lot of infill development and greenfield development, because there's no existing trail or no plans or nobody's envisioning anything, there's often never any easements built in to the development. And then later on, when something is envisioned, the window is closed and you're sort of stuck to having to buy right away or do very difficult, costly things. And I view this project as one of these opportunities.
Somebody check their mute, please. Everyone check their mute. Thank you.
So I view this project as one of these opportunities where on the south side of the property, you've got an easement that goes partially down the property. And I think this is an opportunity that we should have the easement along the entire south side of the property. Even though, you know, the existing plan shows the trail going out into the Lowe's access road, and that's fine. But, you know, I'm not, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't think anybody else does. And we have no idea what's going to happen with the rights to that Lowe's access road and what's that going to be in 20 years? We don't really know. So I think it's really important that we make the entire easement along the south side of the property, because you know I don't want to look back on this in 20 years and have the city try to do something and think about what were we thinking at the time? Why didn't we do that? That would have been easy, but now you can't do it. So this is the right time. So I thought it was important to make a little visual here. So the hatched mark is the part that is going to be an easement. And then the trail comes out into the Lowe's access road, and that's fine because it's a low traffic street. But what I'm proposing here is that this whole area be granted as easement and marked in the plat. I'm not proposing that the existing site design change at all. The trail as designed in the site plan is fine, and along that easement right now, there's in the landscape plan, there's plantings and various things. So I'm not proposing any of that change, just that this entire, I guess it's about a 10-foot swath be granted and marked as a public easement in the plat for future use. And you know, in 20 years, if it's not needed, it's not needed, but it's recorded in the plat for use if it's ever needed. So, you know, we don't kick ourselves later saying, you know, why didn't they do that? So that is my proposal that I would like to do, and I'd like to give this document to go along with the record. And so that's something that when we get to that point, I would like to propose this as a condition.
Okay, and we have Mr. Klein's, it was sent by email to all the commissioners prior to the meeting. He just displayed it.
Actually, it was just sent to you and to you and Bob, but
it was just me earlier today.
Yep, but I'd like to
Okay.
go in the record and we can send it around to everybody.
And that was a little late.
Including
today.
the applicant. And we could no doubt.
So
send
who
it to the
hasn't?
applicant also.
Who hasn't right now?
You, me, and Bob.
Okay, and this is the first time anyone outside of us is seeing that?
Correct.
Okay, surprise, surprise, but not a big one.
Not a big one.
I have a
It
question.
really doesn't change anything, you know, in the site design. It's more just
Okay.
making that available.
Okay, I have a question. If that easement is given, who's responsible for the maintenance and care of that item from there on out?
Well, it's part of there's already, I mean, they're already doing something. They're planting.
Mhm.
It just grants an easement for later if the city wants access to it.
But if easement's given, correct me if I'm wrong, the responsibility for maintenance of that easement
No.
is 100% the city or no? Anyone, lawyer?
No, the easement, it depends on what the terms of the easement say. Is it for a potential easement? I mean, I want to make sure it doesn't interfere with our open space, green space requirements. I mean, you know, I want to be careful. That's all. I don't want to do something that has unintended consequences.
It could change, i.e. change your calculations on lead certification or anything else by square footage of area that you actually can count for green space, right? Kind of what you're leaning to.
Right. I mean, that is as part of our buffer. You know, I think I would like to have Terry Schuman weigh in.
If I could interject here, Mr. Hyatt, it occurs to me that if the easement is written that it's to be used in the future for pedestrian recreational use, then it won't change anything now or in the future.
So, can I chime in as a counsel? I do think it ought to be clear who's going to be
Who's
responsible.
chiming in? Could you state your name? I'm not seeing who's talking here.
Chris Beard, counsel.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
No problem. I suggest that it be very clear if you're voting on this is when you put a condition in, if you're going to include an easement, that we're very clear and hopefully the applicant will accept maintenance responsibility because as I'm understanding, the city does not maintain the landscaping. They will cut the grass. So I want to make sure nothing falls through the cracks when we do these conditions, if we're doing it tonight.
Well, the easement won't be exercised. The easement won't be exercised unless, as Mr. Pline points out, something occurs in the future that makes it impossible to use the access road or something, or that it just becomes necessary for a bike and pedestrian path. So there's no maintenance. I mean, it's what's going to be planted and what's part of the proposed plan here is going to be maintained by the property owner. It's only if the city exercises its rights under the easement that any maintenance responsibilities would shift.
All right.
I think that's a correct understanding. Does that make sense?
You're talking about a future event, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, but possibly future event. I think what Alex is saying makes sense. Too often in the past, we have not made these things possible in the event of a future use, a shift in, people's uses of things. It's not going to happen now. It's only if the city needs it in order for pedestrian and bike use.
All right.
And I think what he's saying is is we should start looking at everything that we do in the city for it as much as possible, envisioning the future and protecting ourselves. Too often we've lost opportunities.
All right. I think that's
which are not really big, which we shouldn't have lost.
Very well.
And to be clear, the ownership of the other piece of the puzzle there to the left, where the easement would end, that other piece of the puzzle, magic puzzle piece, that
Yes.
ownership is current and will be.
That's the applicants. And according to according to their proposal, it's sidewalk.
Why
So
aren't you
they're
asking-
obligated to keep that sidewalk and maintain that sidewalk and so forth.
And, but there's no easement there, or there will be an easement for that?
There isn't.
No, I
There
don't think
is.
that it's necessary because the application remains in effect as long as they, unless there's a change in the property.
Well,
Not in the
in the,
ownership of the property, but unless somebody new comes in and says, well, I want to build condos, and then they change the whole site design. But no, the applicant's responsible for the sidewalk and the cross hatching there, and will continue to be responsible for the landscaping all along. An easement is just a transparent gloss. It could be exercised in the future. That's all it is.
Alex, who is there an easement already here on the left side of that unshaded area?
yeah, the crosshatch, it says trail easement. So
So that easement already exists, right?
no, this is part of their proposal is to create that piece as an easement.
Yeah, I'm wondering why they didn't give us the easement down the whole way anyway.
Yeah,
That's exactly what I'm bringing up. I think they should.
Maybe, is there an explanation or they needed it for the calculation for their stormwater management?
Terry, can you weigh in on that?
I mean, we were providing buffer to the parking lot and we just thought there's a plan in the future to extend that bike trail and that could be done in the Lowe's access road, which is an oversized road back there. As you go if you go into the down Lowe's access road, it narrows down. So the idea was that bike would just run along that Lowe's access road.
And then therefore you wouldn't pave over and have more pavement. I get it. So that road, that you're in the walkway, less pavement, more green. Okay.
And my proposal does not change anything other than to set that aside potentially for future use. Because nobody has a crystal ball nobody knows what potentially can happen to that Lowe's access road. You know, I mean, it's liable to change in some way. Who knows?
That's
But
a very
this
valid
way-
argument.
This way, the entire, you know, at some point 20 years down the road, that trail could continue straight on across the face of the property.
And I'll
if-
just,
if
if
there
I
were
could
some
just
reason.
add beyond, let me just add beyond our property, it's just a steep slope down to the pond. So that trail, if you do extend it beyond that driveway, eventually it has to go over to Lowe's access road because the trail's going to be, that pond over there just slopes off drastically where that it would be extended if you continued the easement through there. So, you know, the idea was to get it over into the Lowe's access road because I don't think you can build a trail easily beyond our property line in that alignment.
Again, that's all in the future, and you know,
Right.
who has a crystal ball?
Doesn't seem to hurt or add cost, would it? Or
That-
would it?
No, it adds no cost. It adds nothing other than a change to how the plat's written and, you know, how this change in the plat is done, and, you know, whatever, everybody's time to make sure that everybody's in agreement with what the language says. But there is no material difference to the site plan.
I don't
That's
see any problem
that
with
is a
this.
key point. I'm not requesting any change to the site plan.
Well, whatever we do, and I appreciate the desire, and I think it's a lofty goal, a worthy goal. I get that, but you know, we have to be careful about putting things on plats. We're going to deal with lenders. We have to be careful. So I don't know. You know, I hate to sit here and craft some language right now, but you know, maybe we can work it out with Mr. Beard in some fashion or form, some language that we can agree upon.
Yeah, I'm not asking that language be developed tonight. You know, I think we are going to have an opportunity to come back and discuss this, at least in some way at our next meeting. So there's some time to go work that.
Is there? There was
I
talk
think
about
we're
voting
gonna
on it
vote.
tonight.
Yeah, I thought you were going to vote tonight.
It'll be
Especially
quick
when you-
drafting.
When you bring up an easement like this, I would think you'd want to maybe wait a couple of weeks and, you know, to vote on it. But that's just my
Well,
thought.
I would have loved to bring it up before, but you know, we can only talk about these things in public meetings. So
I got
So be
you.
it.
No, I'm not dogging what you're saying here. This is good, but just want to make sure. I mean, what does the applicant think about having time to think about this and look at it before it's,
Well, what I think is you could approve it subject to the condition that that we work out the specific language with your council. I mean, that would be something that I think we could do, because it may be that it's a condition in the plan development approval, and we put a note on the plat that refers to that, and that way, you know, there's an obligation to execute the easement in the future upon request or something like that. I mean,
So can I, if you look at the last paragraph that I wrote here, and I'll pull it up, is I think it's really important that this get, or next to the last paragraph, I think it's really important that this get recorded prior to our signing the plat. This has to be on the plat, because, you know, we all know these handshake agreements might last through one property owner, but as soon as some time goes by, water goes under the bridge, properties change hands. I mean, look at the entire right of way of the WB&A Railroad. All of the history of that right of way is gone because it was all sort of done unofficially. So I think it's important that we don't
I
do
agree.
this as a handshake agreement.
I would not ask you for a handshake agreement. They're not really worth anything. But it just occurred to me that you would be approving the plan development and the preliminary plat. You will get the final plat that will come before you. At that point in time, I think we can have the language that's appropriate. That would be my suggestion. That way we have time to figure out what's the right kind of language to put on the plat.
Well, I agree with Mr. Hyatt. I think that maybe tonight is not the time to do specific language, but I do think that it's necessary that it be written in as a condition because we have been hornswoggled in the past by things that don't show up on the plats. So I think that we could put in a condition which is written as, as generally written and then review it at the time that the final plat arrives.
Right, I think we can cover it with a note on the plat, identify the area, and that way we're not coming up with language that, we regret, or at least from the property owner's perspective, regrets later. So I think that way you get what you want, and we can come up with something that makes sense.
Well, I will propose some basic, simple language tonight. If that's okay?
Sure.
You're the lawyer, Bobby. Go for it. I'm definitely not the lawyer.
Okay, for the plat, possibility of an easement, we broached that. Any other comments regarding the plat possible easement being drawn up before we go into reviewing the public comment item that was submitted? Anything else, Mr. Pline's item here?
So no more on this item, but just one comment. I'm happy with the third signal. Like everybody else, I'd really like to see the traffic circle happen. So I hope that can happen, and that some progress can be made towards that end. But I'm satisfied enough with it, with the addition of that third piece, that assuages my fear of that blind crosswalk.
Well, to be clear for the public tonight and the modifications to the slight modification of the planner, the final plan is to go without a roundabout, correct?
No, my understanding is that these are two alternatives, and if the Graduate Hotel will grant the necessary easement, that they can build a circle. And if they will not grant the necessary easement, then we have to build an island.
So
island plan.
on that, this is actually a question for staff.
Yeah.
There's very, very specific language about that in the application. And so the question for staff is, does that language get recorded as part of the record as to what the applicant's going to do? So it goes into, if from the time of approval to, I don't remember the details, but 12 months, 12 months, if it can't be done, we're going to do this. So I assume all of that language goes into the record, and that's what the applicant will be bound to.
Right, that
correct?
language is in their mitigation plan for their APF, so it will be part of their.
Okay, good.
And you say the Graduate Hotel, who actually owns the property? The Graduate Corporation, or are they just leasing the property from someone else?
They are the property owners.
They are the property owners.
But the access road, they own an easement for use on the access road. And my understanding is that the city reserved the rights to use it as a pedestrian and, a pedestrian pathway.
Now, that would make much easier, but alas, that is not what happened. The Graduate.
It did not happen?
No.
Oh. Well, that's what Mr. Stephen Carr told me many years ago, is that a pedestrian use was reserved when they granted them.
That was originally the plan, but we did a lot of title research, and that's not what ended up happening.
So this is really putting a finer point on my issue.
This puts a finer point on Alex's issue.
Yes.
And log into his.
Okay. Damn.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Right. So basically, the Lowe's access road and them granting an easement in order to do the circle is the long pole in the tent for one of the two options. The way it's looked at so far, is that they didn't want to, talk or converse or do anything to make the circle happen at this point. It's my opinion of view that I've been briefed here, and I think the graduate's been pretty much non-responsive to the applicant. And so the circle, the roundabout option is seemingly on the ropes, if you ask me. So what you really end up with is the straight through option, unless something can be done in the future, which nobody has a crystal ball. It just doesn't seem like it's really something that's had any motivation from the graduate side of the house. I don't know how we necessarily apply that motivation.
I would say just the last 2 weeks, we've had some contact. For a while, the graduate went quiet at the beginning of COVID and we were worried they were going out of business. But we've had some communication with their general manager last week and this week. And I would say, I feel more optimistic about it now than I have in several months. I can't promise anything, but I think that they've acknowledged that it would be in their own best interest, really, because they have a hard time turning out of there. So I think if, we can keep making that point, then I wouldn't despair just yet, I would say.
But the graduate would actually have to come to some type of agreement, I'm going to guess, within the next 10 months and before construction really starts happening, or is this something that could actually be taken care of later down the road, even after construction of most of the site design is complete?
I mean, let's see, I don't think we would have to have a signed, or, I don't think we'd have to own the land within 10 months. It's we have to, if such additional land is not acquired within 12 months of the date of the opinion. Okay, yeah, we have to acquire the land within 12 months. But, I don't think that's unrealistic.
Well, the harder it is to make a left turn out of the access road, the more pressure there is.
And it's going to be quite hard. Yeah.
Well, we're going to make it harder by a condition which I'm going to propose.
Okay. I do need to bring up and display, I'd like to display Mr. Erber's addition. Let me make sure I can show this properly. I will share this. I don't think this is it.
And Ben, can you make sure to mention all of the public comments you've received, the names of the people who submitted comments?
I have that buried here under my other documents. I was not planning on mentioning all those names. Mr. Erber being the only one since July 22nd that was submitted via email. Mr. Tom Smith, is he on? Want to confirm that? You want to back me up on that, or have the total number?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
So so you just backed me up as I rambled on there of, we've only had one public comment submitted since our July 22nd meeting. Correct, Mr. Smith?
Correct.
Thank you. And that was from Mr. Erber, which I will show here.
And Tom, what about the Zelenicuses? The
Valinakis.
Zelenakis, did you receive those?
I did
Yes.
not.
Yes, a while ago.
Oh, they came prior, I believe.
That was prior, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you had seen those.
Okay, and to prove it, I'm showing Mr. And the reason why I'm really showing Mr. Erber's distinctly is because it is the only one. And oh, by the way, he lives on the adjoining street. He is the adjoining resident, and his item, I want the public to know that it was sent in and posted to eTrack it, and the developer was able to see that and then therefore respond and be prepared for this meeting. So it's a fantastic example of public comment actually getting incorporated and seen by the applicant as well as the Planning Commission. And the items brought up in that document, let me bring that down, of concern. For number one, they were in favor of the traffic pedestrian flow using traffic circle roundabout, and not so much the other straight direction. We talked about that and addressed that. There was also discussion about the crosswalks and sidewalks flow to be limited by the entrance of the proposed development and widening parts of the sidewalk. We've also talked about that and addressed that in this meeting already. Thank you very much. Then the relocation, the entry hotel, we talked about the headlights, and then also more detailed information for the section retaining wall and landscaping. We talked about all these items and they were brought up by commissioners during the meeting, hopefully to the satisfaction of the public. But I believe so. So thank you for that input, Mr. Erber. And thank you for addressing that by the applicant. Made things a lot quicker. That brings the items that will be entered into the record. And Miss Tammy Hook, I don't know if you're still there or awake at the moment, but to get the exhibits to enter into the record, that one will be entered into the record. I want to get I believe that will be with the rest of the public comments, so it doesn't get another vowel put in front of it. And also we'll have the Park Place modification package. I believe that's going to be an F, Foxtrot. Is that correct, Miss Tammy?
That's correct.
And then we also have Mr. Alex Pline submitted his own easement letter of recommendation, little design there. That would have to be, I believe, G as in golf, correct?
Right. What's the date on that, please?
Today.
Today, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, we got that later this afternoon, but it's valid, very valid. So that takes care of all the exhibits to enter into the record. And we're also entering in 01920 and 02920 for legislation that will be going over here shortly. That takes care of that. Any other things to worry about, Tammy, administratively?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so here we are. We have the applicant has completed his submission. There was a change, and for the public comment, we received our public comment and addressed that throughout this discussion. We also have had chance for all the commissioners to bounce back and forth. Is there any last minute comments by the commissioners on hand, or any recommendations to hear anything important for anyone out there that we have online? And I see we have one of our older persons here at the moment. Is that for the legislation or is that for this development right now?
Are you speaking to me?
Yes, Ms. Tierney.
Yes, thank you. It's for this development.
It's for this development. And to be in line with public comment and whatnot, are we allowed to have Ms. Tierney make her public comments now, or I mean, why not?
The hearing is still open.
Yeah, it's still open. I have no issue with it. And I think council members are definitely ones in there that should be able to make comment as big representatives of the public. Any other commissioners have any issue with that? Okay, Ms. Tierney, please go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for accepting my verbal testimony. As you know, my ward does not include this site. It stops at Park Place, and so it is from that perspective. But I just want to say that I've been following this project and the evolution of the design, and I know this might sound ridiculous, but in listening to your questions and the level of detail, it does reflect on where this project is and how much effort it has taken to get to this place where your questions are at this, you know, as I said, level of detail. And as always, I applaud the commission for that. You know, that's why I'm here. But I also want to say, I don't want you to lose sight of the architectural element of this, and the sensitivity to what this building will look like from not only the Park Place side, but from the street side. It articulates itself so that it introduces some shadowing from the street. It is, from my perspective, a very valid effort in designing with nature, if you will. It is a difficult site, and I think that the stormwater work has been, the rework and it is good. As you said, it does exceed the requirements. So as far as Park Place and their perception, of course, their concern was the roof and what they would see and not see. And they're happy with just the minimalist approach and centering the units so that they don't see them. But I just think that this project is a really good example of a comprehensive effort that we should always do, civil, site, architectural, so thank you to the developer for coming this far, and to the commission for your thorough review and your care for all of those components. So thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Tierney. And I should make it known to the public, if they don't already know, that Ms. Tierney has a significant background in construction in her life. So those words mean a lot, more so because of that. Am I correct, Ms. Tierney? You would spend a lot of time in construction?
Yes. And I tell you, the review you guys do reminds me of the charrettes we used to have in concept design. I'm just very impressed with your review. And I guess I should say I do support the project for the record.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Tierney. Any questions by the commissioners or response? Okay, thank you, Ms. Tierney, for that testimony. It was very valid. Any other council members present? I don't see them on the screen, but if any other council members present, they can also have a moment to speak. And I do not see any. And Julian, let me know if they do pop in. Okay, as for public testimony, that will conclude the public testimony and open forum for that. They'll move into the deliberations by the commissioners and coming up with some conditions and whatnot, and if we want to proceed for a vote. So commissioners, over to you. Comments?
Let me take the lead because we've talked this thing out. I have sent to each of you, to Ms. Hook, to Mr. Sale, Ms. Butler, and Mr. Pline, a set of conditions that I typed out. So that it's in your should be in your emails. Had I known Mr. Hyatt's, I would have, and Mr. Beard's, I would have sent it to them as well, but I don't know him. So you'll just have to listen up. There's really nothing terribly surprising about what I'm about to read for the public. But basically, I make a motion that we approve this project subject to the conditions which are enumerated in the staff report and to these additional conditions. Condition number 18, the quote, circle, end quote, the circle alternative at the Poplar Path Taylor crossing is preferred to the island alternative. But whichever alternative is chosen, it shall be constructed largely in accord with the amended drawing submitted on August 18th, 2020. That's a bit of housekeeping. 19, the applicant shall make a financial contribution to the city in a maximum amount of $20,000 for sidewalk right-of-way acquisition and construction of sidewalks along Taylor Avenue towards Cedar Park. See the adequate public facilities attachment D. Also housekeeping. 20, the northern quote pork chop island shall be extended southward to the maximum extent possible to reduce left turns from the access road onto Taylor Avenue. 21, the third pedestrian activated light shall be located for the maximum safety of pedestrians. I could identify which one is the third, but I think that I think everybody understands. And also, this is just sort of just an open-ended encouragement to really locate that thing quite sensitively. That's all. So it's a bit of housekeeping. 22, however, is not just housekeeping. The sidewalk along Taylor Avenue from the access road to West Street shall be buffered from the road curb by 5 feet. That's something additional. 23, the quote shortcut to the Poplar Park path shall be fenced and landscaped for minimal maintenance needs. And I put this in, it's also sort of housekeeping. I just put it in so that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle. I'm very concerned about that intersection, and I'm very concerned that we're going to hand it over to Parks and Rec, and they're just not in a position to weed and garden and prune and take care of things. I know because I do a lot of weeding in Poplar Park, and they don't do any. That's not what they do. Those are my three conditions. Now, Mr. Klein, if I could continue with the flag here. Condition number 24 would read that an easement for pedestrian and bicyclist use, according to Exhibit G, shall be granted to the city. And that leaves a great deal of room to make that clear and specific, and yet orders that it get done. And need I bring up our old grievances about not stating clearly things that need to go onto the plat, Mr. Hyatt?
Can you amend, or can you modify your condition so that it is to be depicted on the final record plat? So that's where the final binding language will take place.
I would be glad to make that. An easement for pedestrian and bicyclist use, according to Exhibit G, shall be granted to the city and
recorded.
And what's the?
I would say, and final language shall be as depicted on the final record plat, or language shall be as depicted on the final record plat. That way it gives us some time to put in to craft some language. We can run it by Mr. Beard, and by the time you get the final plat,
that's fine.
We'll have it worked out.
That is fine. So that it would, an additional sentence, final language will be depicted on the record plat.
Yes.
That's fine. That makes sense. Okay, good. So with that addition, I'll accept that addition. Okay, that's my motion, and those are my conditions.
Before we move off that,
I would say, look, this has been, as Ms. Turney pointed out, this has been a really, really long well thought through project, I must say. It was changed, midway, much to the better. I think that Mr. Wilson gets credit for that, but I'd also like to give some credit to Mr. Smith, because I understand that he's the one who said, look, you really need to change the way this hotel is oriented. And gratefully, the team saw that. The sensitive place is the crossing, because the property is placed at a sensitive place. And so I would hope that these kinds of conditions will make this project into a stellar project, and a safe project, and one that people can look back and say, everybody did their jobs well. But I will accept any criticism or amendments that are reasonable.
so I have one technical issue with condition 22.
Yes.
So the way it's worded, between the access road to West Street. So that really includes,
Can I amend that to the dry cleaner entrance?
Yeah, I think you need to do that because
You can amend anything you want. You said you'd like to make a motion, but you never made it. So that's
because that all the way to West Street includes brick stuff that's part of Park Place. And there's actually not 5 feet buffer.
All right, I will accept that amendment and change West Street to dry cleaner entrance.
Or with the end of the existing Park Place sidewalk. I don't know how you delineate that. I don't know what the
Well, it'll-
applicant
I
would
mean-
call that. Because there's still a piece from the dry cleaner to where the brick sidewalk is as part of Park Place. It's
Right,
just a
but that's
question, do
okay.
we, you know,
That part is safe.
okay, fair enough.
Okay, so I make a motion and to include these 20, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 additional conditions.
And
Can I-
what is not depicted on the screen is the easement, just for everybody's essay, so. because
And
it wasn't-
Bob, I just have a quick, a couple things. In condition number 19, you said the minimum amount of 20,000. Shouldn't we, or you said maximum, shouldn't we make that minimum? So if it costs more to do that sidewalk and they don't do it until 5 years from now, don't we want it to be more really connected with the actual cost at the time that sidewalk is built? So don't put a maximum on it, but you know.
Well, I understand that, you know, that it was worked out in the adequate public facilities and in that attachment. Now, one way to deal with that, if you're comfortable with what's in that attachment, then which my recollection is that it's, the attachment says, the agreement that was reached is that it would be a maximum amount of $20,000.
Yeah, I think it should be more tied to the actual cost at the time that the sidewalk is built, because I don't think the taxpayers want to pick up that cost or it won't get built. I was just walking down from Admiral Heights the other day to go across to West Annapolis to Rutabaga, and like there's a whole section where there's no park, there's no sidewalk. And I had a baby stroller at the time and somebody said, yep, the city just wouldn't pay for that. It's about a 150-foot section, but if you're trying to come from Admiral Heights to go across to West Annapolis, you can't get there. And that's never gonna, you know, when is that sidewalk ever gonna go in? It's probably
Well,
not.
we're talking along Taylor Avenue.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying that I think we have to tie the real cost for this infrastructure improvement.
So for what it's worth, attachment D does not use the word maximum or minimum. It just says with a contribution of $20,000.
And maybe we want to put minimum contribution because it could cost more in the future. And I want the city to be able to go back and tell the developer, you know what, it costs $10,000 more. Kick in your 10,000. We need this.
Not right.
Leaving an open-ended number, I would think the developer applicant wouldn't want that. I mean,
Of course they don't. I'm just saying it's a public benefit that we can ask for.
Open-ended number is.
Well, we could put a maximum. How about if we think that in 10 years with the rate of inflation, it would only, you know, include it increase 5,000. So, you know, to a maximum. I mean, I just feel like there should be some leeway in there to relate to the actual cost to the taxpayers.
No more than 50,000.
But it's
No.
a moving target. You want to have a minimum, but it's hard to have a maximum. It becomes a moving target to build in extra cost.
Oh, well, of course, but maybe what we just heard from our chairman makes sense. Just put a random maximum just so that if it does go up in some way, the taxpayers don't have to be hit with that, or it won't get done. I mean, what I'm saying is I see places in the city where probably deals like this have been struck and the sidewalks are never built. And it's because our budget doesn't allow it. I mean, there's so many things on our capital infrastructure list right now. I just feel like if it's more than 20,000 and we don't get any more contribution from the developer, it just won't be done. And then it's going to be an unsafe walk from the hotel to the Naval Academy Stadium.
Well, my understanding from what Dr. Nash said is that the figure was arrived at by measuring the number of feet and then multiplying it by the cost per whatever linear foot.
Right, but doesn't that change over years? Like the pool just increased in cost drastically because by the time they actually built it, it was several years, you know, past when they had gotten the estimates, and those construction costs, and correct me, I know Miss Ellie or Alderman Tierney is on the call still. So is there, Ellie, some way to project what the increased cost could be over a period of time? Could you say 2%, 3% cost over 10 years, maybe?
Do the standard of doubling every 8 years. So that's why I said 50,000. You may get under that, but 20,000 is a good start. I mean, that's for sure. Jesus Christ.
Well, Mr. Chairman, may I be heard?
Go ahead, sure.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to accomplish, but the 20,000 was part of a number of conditions that came out of the APF mitigation. So you know, it's 20,000 here. It's the cost of the circle, which is probably $300 and some $1,000. So I think the 20,000. I don't believe it's meant to acquire all rights of way and construct all sidewalks. It's a contribution that is a fair, has a fair relationship to this project and on top of everything else that it's required to do. So I don't think it's appropriate to expect the applicant here to pick up the whole tab for whatever might happen in the future. This is a contribution that they're making that was determined by the Director of Planning and Zoning in consultation with all the other departments. And that's, I think you're crossing into an area that's not appropriate.
Well, I think as long as there's some sort of maximum that is appropriate. So I would disagree respectfully.
Well, we can respectfully disagree.
That's right.
So Ms. Butler, what is it that you're saying?
That I think we should at least say that if it costs more than $20,000 in the future to build this very important link for safety purposes between the hotel, the sidewalk between the hotel and Naval Academy, that we should have some kind of a sliding scale to say the contribution is $20,000 and you know, a minimum of 20,000, but up to a maximum of 50,000 or some number that we arrive at.
Wait a minute. When is that contribution made? Is it made within the next year or so, or is the contribution not made 10 years from now? Because if it's made within the next year or so, then the city has possession of that money, and the city gains from that money value by the right of inflation over the next year or so.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know.
If the transition of the money is now, then you don't change it. We leave it as is.
It has to be made when this plan development gets implemented. We have a certain period of time to get a building permit, and so this isn't a forever type of a deal.
So the contribution is made prior to completion of the project, or prior to breaking ground, or when?
I think it would be paid at time of issuance of permits.
Well, in that case, there's no need to change what's written already, in my opinion. You leave it as 20,000.
You know, Ben, I think in a way you're right, just because if we have the money at the time the permit issued, then we get the rate of return on that $20,000. So hopefully it will be enough to increase as the cost of the sidewalk increases.
Okay. So we don't change it then?
Yeah, no, I'm okay with that. The other thing that I would like to add is I do think that based on everything, I just skimmed our comprehensive plan and you know, the policies to reduce the polluting effects of stormwater runoff into the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries. Everyone knows College Creek is impaired. And the policy states the city should seek to reduce pollutant loading from stormwater runoff to levels equivalent to 10%. I mean, there's a lot of different sections of the code, which I think allow us to say that at least 75% of the parking lot should be concrete. I know it adds a little bit of cost to the project, but the cost to the city and the benefit to the environment is significant. So that would be a condition I think we should include.
Okay, so we have not changing the 20,000, just leaving it as is. And we also have an addition, which would be 25 of adding at least 75% concrete.
Yeah, for the parking area, the area that's.
Ms. Miller, since I made the motion and I would have to agree to that amendment, I'm loath to agree to something which is as open-ended as that is. I have not gotten any sense of what the costs of that might be. I find it kind of late in the game to bring it up.
Well, we're not allowed to talk about this during, you know, off record. So that was Ben brought it up at the last meeting, and I thought by now they would have come back with additional costs that would, just give us some numbers, but they didn't. So I feel like we should, it's not a new concept. Ben did a great job of explaining why it was important in the last meeting. So, and we're not saying 100% of the surface area should be concrete. We're saying 75%. And we're not saying permeable concrete, which is really expensive. That's what costs money when you do permeable pavers and permeable concrete. This is just going from asphalt to concrete. So I don't think it's a big ask at this point.
I would suggest that we vote on that separately. And then we vote on that before we vote on my general motion to approve and the stated conditions.
Fair enough.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we, did Ms. Butler make a motion clearly, and then we take a vote on that and hold in abeyance what I've moved.
I jive with you. You have not accepted Ms. Butler's proposed item number 25, which would be at least 75% pavement concrete. But
I can make a motion to have us vote on it is what I think Bob is suggesting, which I think is a good suggestion. And I therefore make a motion that we include in our conditions that 75% of the surface area of the parking lot be concrete rather than just asphalt.
I'll second that motion.
Well, wait a minute. You got rules of procedure here, parliamentary procedure. There's already a motion on the floor.
Was that ever seconded?
Exactly. I don't believe we had a second to that motion. So you have a motion, you generally have a second, and then you debate about it. But Mr. Waldman actually made a suggestion to motion, but not an actual motion. And then we started talking about the conditions, and then he made a motion again. So basically, to get this right, the motion on the floor was not recognized as being in process yet, because we're still deliberating the items that would go with that motion. So, Ms. Diane, you would like to actually have a separate motion for an item. So if we vote on approval with conditions, and then we approve with conditions, how can we have a vote after that to add another condition? It's either we add this condition or not. So I would rather take it as, let's go ahead. We have Mr. Waldman suggested items 18 to 24. And Ms. Butler wants to make a 25. Let's go ahead and address that first with a motion on the 75% concrete. Vote on that one is being added to the others or not. And then once that is or isn't, then we can proceed with the rest of the motion to go with the final vote. So I would like to make a motion on approval, or make a motion to approve or disapprove Ms. Butler's 75% concrete requirement item to the other conditions. Is there a second for that?
I second.
Obviously, okay. All those in favor of adding that as a condition, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The condition does not pass, even though you'd think I would have voted for that one, but 75% concrete, that's not, that's too nebulous, and it's not, it's either 100% or not for the pavement of the parking lot, in my opinion. That'd be a major talk through. So we can't, I don't believe we can just add that as an item right now. What I can say is I thoroughly would, emphasize that it would be nice to add that as more concrete in the parking lot area if you can, or wherever. But I can't make you do that based on it's not in the current building code that we have. We should change that first. Okay, that didn't pass.
No, it is. I'm not sure what you're saying. It's not in the code. I'm confused.
To force them. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm not sure why you're saying that we don't. It sounds like you believe that perhaps we don't have the authority to do more stormwater protection. And maybe I misunderstood what you were saying.
Well, the place to change it is in the design manual for parking lots and so forth. That's the place to change it, so that everybody knows from the get-go that they're going to be required to put 45 or 65 or 75 or 105%, concretes or whatever they're supposed to do. That's the place to change it. And that's a place where we could bring something up in new business as something that we think ought to be changed in the design manual that applies to everybody everywhere throughout the city. Do you follow me?
Well,
You understand what I'm saying?
sort of, but basically they have to treat 100% for redevelopment and 150 for new development. And maybe the question is for Mr. Schuman right now to run through the exact numbers again, because maybe I have them confused. I thought you were
Well,
not
I
doing.
don't, the time for public hearing and testimony is really closed. And if you feel that that factor has not been met, then you can vote against the project.
Will do. Gotcha.
Okay.
So I would renew my motion to approve, and with the additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 conditions, 18 through 24.
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion on the floor for approving project plan as designed, including the changes that were submitted today in front of the Planning Commission and conditions added 18 through 24. The preference of the circle, the financial donation of 20,000, the pork chop island extending south, the relocation, the buffer, the 5-foot sidewalk, the shortcut to Poplar Path, fence and landscape changes, the item 24, the easement, which would be put on the plan. And that would conclude those conditions. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? The approval passes with those conditions. Ms. Hook, please annotate that.
So was it, it was 3-1, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
I think I heard somebody else. Was Mr.
I see Mr. Iams is there, but let's make sure, let's just make sure on the vote. Mr. Waldman, you were an aye. I was an Mr. Sale here, and aye. Mr.
Klein was an aye.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for showing up there. And Miss Butler was a nay. So that's.
And I was a nay as well.
Wait, how could you vote? You weren't here for the whole thing.
Yes,
Were
I
you?
was.
When did you chime in? Did I miss
Very
that?
early on in the beginning of this.
What?
Okay. David Iams been on for quite some time, evidently.
Oh, I didn't. Oh,
Maybe I missed the very beginning. What time? It's been on since about a little before 8, I think.
Oh.
Okay. Well, that'll be enough to get the gist of things. You've got the gist of things. I'll accept that vote. And that was a yay or a nay, Mr. Iams?
I said a nay.
You say nay? Okay. So it's 3-2 in that case.
So did he, did he vote during the Butler thing? I'm sorry, I was confused. I'm confused.
I did.
Okay.
I
All
voted
right.
with Diane on the Butler thing as well.
I thought I heard a voice and I couldn't see you on the screen, and I thought, who's saying that?
Okay, so it's 3-2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And then, Mr. Sale, did we close the public hearing? I might have missed it if you did.
We did close them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. I believe Mr. Beard and Mr. Hyatt have some work to do with the easement definition. Mr. Pline, I'm sure you want to be involved in that as well. And staff, Dr. Nash, you have any direction for us to proceed properly with that so we don't mess anything up, getting that easement properly annotated on the plat, final plat, in the language? Or Tom, thank you.
I'm happy to work with the applicant and the council on the language for the final plat.
Okay, so with Tom Smith, Mr. Beard. Mr. Beard, did you have any comments on it?
Well, just one, a note to add 24 for the purposes of the condition, as it's going to be stated for the opinion, it'll state an easement for pedestrian and bicycle use according to Exhibit G shall be granted to the city, and the final language to carry out this provision shall be depicted on the final plat. That's what I hear is proposed for this condition at this time. And we can work out the language to be depicted on the final plat. Is that correct?
I believe that's the gist of it, Mr. Klein.
Correct, yep.
All right, very well. I'm clear.
All right, our legal representation is clear. How about the applicant? Are you clear? Mr.
Understood.
Hyde?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. All right, commissioners, that takes care of that item on the agenda. We have two more items. Any other final comments from the commissioners on that item?
No, let's go on to the next.
Any commissioners have any other comment? Okay, we're moving down the agenda. I believe it's 10 minutes to 10. Let's go ahead and if anybody needs, does anybody need a 2-minute bathroom break? Let's be honest. Or can we proceed on? I think we can proceed on. And anybody needs to go to the bathroom, just pop out. All right, we have two items. In the first will be adequate public facilities, auto transportation facilities for the purpose of clarifying the circumstances that would require a traffic impact analysis. We also have small cell systems. So which one would we like first, honestly, from the staff to present? Because we're going to hear both of these being presented today by the staff, and then we will leave it open for public comment. And then coming back on the 3rd of September, Mr. Waldman will chair that meeting, and then we'll go over the public comments and commissioner deliberations on those items then. So we're just going to hear the staff presentation today. Okay, over to staff.
All right, good evening. Thank you. So I will give a brief overview on the APF legislation. You might remember this legislation from over a year ago when it was first almost brought to you. However, then it was pulled because staff had made several comments about the legislation on our concerns that we had about it. And so the sponsor, Alderman Arnett, who I believe is on the call, pulled the legislation and reworked it. And now you have the amended version in front of you tonight. So I've submitted a new staff report in addition to my old staff report, so you could see the differences between what is currently being proposed. It was adopted by City Council on second reader, so it is cleaner than looking at an amended ordinance. And that is what you have, as well as the original ordinance. I've also included in your packet our policies and guidelines for traffic impact analysis for proposed development in the city. Those are our existing policies that are online on our comprehensive planning page. And this is what we follow when we develop a scope for traffic impact studies. The intent of this legislation, and I'm sure Alderman Arnett can speak to this, is to codify what is in the regulations in the code. I've become very familiar with Title 22 lately, and you might notice that this section of Title 22 is unique in that it has no goals, no standards, and is much less structured than the other sections of Title 22. Which reminds me to mention to you that I am starting to look at Title 22 in more depth and to start making some changes. I'm starting with recreation facilities. So I'll be telling you about some ideas we have for changing that in the next few meetings. So this ordinance largely takes what's in the policies, puts it into the same structure as the other sections of Title 22. So when we do our APF, we will have everything in the code all together. I know that there's a lot of interest in additional changes to Title 22 traffic sections, and I would like to do possibly combine our transportation and our auto and non-auto facilities into one multimodal APF section. and look more at other measures of performance that I think are better indicators of how people experience traffic than level of service, which I feel is a really antiquated approach to traffic, but is still industry standard. So we're on the hunt for better ways to measure traffic impact. But in the meantime, I think this is good because it helps at least get Title 22 all uniform. So all that has the same sections can be applied the same way. It's just easier to explain instead of having this one section that instead of talking about adequate facilities, the title of the section is traffic impact studies. Even the title doesn't make sense or match the other sections. So most of the comments that the staff had on the original ordinance have been addressed. There's still only one main concern that I have in terms of implementing it, and that is exactly how we define frequency of accidents. There's no industry standard for this, or the idea of other traffic safety issues. I would rather have something more concrete than that, but I don't really know what that would be because we don't have, I mean, I can ask the police department for information on number of crashes, things like that. I can ask State Highway for that information, but there's not like a number that says, you know, after this number, it's a dangerous intersection, or after this number, there is a large frequency of accidents. So I'm just feel like that's a little bit vague and could probably be clarified a little bit. But I've also included the functional classification map from the comprehensive plan. And I apologize, I copied it in black and white, but if you look in the comprehensive plan, figure 4.2, you can see it in color. And so those are my comments on the ordinance, unless anyone has any questions about anything the ordinance says.
Please feel free to ask staff any questions now, and then to reiterate procedure, we'll ask staff questions from the commission, then we'll open up public comment and then leave it open and just go right to the next item from staff. So if you have any comments, questions from staff, go ahead.
Sally, I don't understand this section number 2 that you said is still unclear. A traffic impact analysis should be required when the frequency has been described, identified. That doesn't mean anything. It just doesn't mean anything. But it's an applicant files an application and he identifies the number of accidents that have happened within 150 feet or whatever it is. And then he's got to do a traffic impact analysis because he comes forward with that information. This doesn't make sense, this number paragraph, subparagraph 2. And it may be that the intent is that any traffic impact analysis has to include that information. That it may be that, but I agree with you that it's like, unless police department says, look, we got a really unsafe intersection here.
I believe that meant that if they identify intersections, then even if they didn't trip even if they didn't exceed the 400 trips, if they were near a very dangerous intersection, they would still have to do a traffic impact study.
Yes, I get that.
But I'm just not sure what a very dangerous intersection is, how that is defined.
Right. And right. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. It's not defined. And I can't ask the police department to make an off the cuff decision, nor can I ask the police department to identify how would you mitigate a dangerous intersection. So
I think you're in violent agreement.
Huh?
I think you're in violent agreement.
With Dr. Nash?
Yes.
Yes.
And with me too.
Okay.
It's just very subjective because what somebody thinks is, one person might think one crash at an intersection is the end of the world. One person might find that an acceptable loss. I mean, it's very subjective. So
Yes, this cannot become law as it stands. It just can't. It's not, it doesn't mean anything. And anyway, okay. Can I move on to something, other concerns I have? Okay. This would be on page 3 of what you sent out, and it's standards. And it would be, you look down at B. It says that if the level of service is D or below, or this will bring it to below D, then required improvements shall bring it at least to that level. But then if you go down to D, well, let's take C first. What C says is that under certain circumstances, the applicant shall mitigate the number of trips generated by the proposed project. B says you're to do actual construction, actual maintenance. C says you're just supposed to mitigate the number of trips. I don't understand D. If the results of the traffic impact analysis are that the project is subject to mitigate the trips generated, then the applicant shall construct the improvements as required by DPW. Shouldn't that be reading that if the results of the impact analysis says that the proposal has to provide improvements, then they have to be constructed according to DPW? It's not mitigating the number of trips. DPW is not going to monitor the trip generation. I'm not being very clear here.
Well, I think it probably could be more clear, but it's saying that if they have to do mitigation because of the number of trips they generate, which
No.
isn't, then they have to construct the improvements in accordance to the requirements of Department of Public Works.
But that's not what D says. It just says if the results of the analysis says you're supposed to mitigate the number of trips. It doesn't say anything about making improvements. It just says mitigating the trips. Then whatever improvements are required by DPW. So it's not written properly. I think that what it needs to say is that if the proposal is subject to making improvements to improve the level of service, then those improvements are supervised by Department of Public Works. Not mitigating the number of trips. That's not something DPW does. You follow me yet? No?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure, because I'm not sure what D goes with, because for B, for example, is the situation where the study area will operate below the level of D with the proposed project in future years. And without that project, it wouldn't be below D. So in that case, they have to do improvements shall bring the level of service to at least a level of service D.
Right, improvements, physical improvements.
Right, so that's clear. I think that part's clear, right?
And shouldn't it say right then and there that they'll be supervised by Department of Public Works?
I don't think it matters. I think that's
okay. I don't think it matters either, but keep going.
Yeah, So then C, so I think, do we all understand B? B is if they're making things bad, worse than D.
And they
Okay.
have to make physical improvements.
They have to bring the level of service back to at least the level of a service of D.
By making improvements.
Right, or they could add there might be some other way other than a physical improvement. Maybe not, maybe I'm wrong, but yes, by making improvements. Okay, so C is if the level of service is E or below, or if the traffic impact analysis shows intersections in the study area are expected to have E or below with or without the project. Oh, then the applicant shall mitigate the trips generated by the project. So if the level of service is already E or below, they don't have to bring it up to a D. They just have to mitigate their impact. And I guess by their impact in this case, we're saying the trips generated. So the vehicles that they're adding to the road network, they have to mitigate the impact of those vehicles.
How? By reducing the number of trips or by making physical improvements?
Or a combination of the two.
Well, then it needs to say that, because it doesn't say that. The way I read it is, they'll just mitigate the number of trips generated by the project. That's one way I read this. It doesn't say.
Yeah, but I don't think we need to tell them how they will mitigate the number of trips. They just have to mitigate it one way or the other.
And Bob, I'm just trying to figure out, I think I agree with what you're saying. Maybe you could clarify that by saying something like mitigate the number of trips by, and then what is the real way to do that? Isn't it just by decreasing the size of the project? So let's say you have 100.
But there's other ways to do that. They could add road capacity. They could, change the mix of their project. The residential, if it's a mixed use project, they could change the percentages of residential and commercial. I don't want to be too prescriptive because there's a lot of different ways they could do it.
Okay.
Okay, that helped me because I wasn't understanding exactly that point either. Thanks.
Well, but that's not what it says. It just says mitigate the trips. It doesn't say mitigate the effects. It doesn't say, it says, when it says mitigate the trips, the way I read it is reduce the number of trips. That's only one part. It doesn't say what it's meant to say.
I agree. I think it should be more clear, but I'm not exactly sure what that wording is right now.
I just think that it's very unclear. And let me see if there's anything else.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is not really what we want to end up with, namely because it still sticks us with level of service, which doesn't get anyone what they want from a traffic analysis. I see this as kind of an interim measure, which is not to say we can't improve the language. And while I'm reading this, I don't really even understand D. So I think there's probably still room to improve even this, but I don't want you to feel, I want you to feel like this is the start of a conversation about this section of the code. And we clearly have a long way to go. So, I spent a lot of time poring over our policy and guidelines. So I know that they could be clear in a lot of ways.
Well, it sounds like you and I somebody should get together and rewrite some of this. That's okay. So that's the second pothole. If you turn to the last page of the ordinance, F.
Oh, you know what? D is just saying that if they have to do improvements, they have to follow what Public Works says. I think that's just what D is saying. So D kind of.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I
as
think
the
that's what
applicant's lawyer, I read it that it doesn't apply to C, because C is unclear. Okay.
It should apply to C and B. It should be more clear that it applies to C and B.
I agree. Okay. Okay. Okay, can I move on?
Yes, sorry.
It's okay. No, we got it together. Last page, F. You're there to give money to you and blah, blah, blah. If the cost of the analysis exceeds what they've remitted to you, then you shall withhold approval. Approval of what?
I don't know. That's never happened because I just will get more money from the developer. I mean, we just stop reviewing the project, really, is what we do. So.
Okay, okay, okay. And then in G, talks about other jurisdictions. And you've changed it from the first version, which was that the other jurisdictions had the power to determine whether, to make decisions. Now we just ask the other jurisdictions, you're to consider their comments and whether the mitigating improvements proposed by the applicant are sufficient to meet the standards. What standards?
I don't know. I don't know if they mean the level of service standard of the other jurisdiction, or if they mean like roadway design standards, because normally if I'm working with the county, I will have them often review the scope. It definitely review the studies and comments. And then if there is an improvement proposed, I have to get the applicant to run their model and prove that it's going to work and bring the road up to the level of service that it has to be in per the city. So I think that that's referring to level of service standards, but again, it is vague.
Okay, so that needs to be clarified. That's the third pothole. Okay, I have nothing further. God.
Any other commissioners' questions of the staff presentation? And keep in mind, we will keep this open for public comment till the next meeting, and the next meeting you'll have time to deliberate it. But it would be nice to get any major inputs if you need rewrites of paragraphs. And already we have B, C, D, and also F need to be looked at for possible clarification and rewrite. Also here at the Planning Commission, it's been said in the past, and notably by Mr. Harold, that we most of the time don't want to be in the business of writing the legislation for them, but in order to get what we want, we kind of have to do that sometimes. It is possible that we just take this legislation in the future, instead of rewriting it completely, you throw it back with concerns for each paragraph and to demand clarity and then work it out in the off time. But I will leave that over to Mr. Waldman, who's going to be conducting the next meeting, and you guys. Any other questions for the staff on the proposal of this item? Okay, seems to be some clarity issues. We'll hammer that out. We'll now open the public comment session on this item. Any members of the public, please feel free to go on to the Planning and Zoning Department's website to submit an application for comment, or you can email the Planning and Zoning Department reps directly if you have to, but that's not preferred. Please use the method that's posted on the website. Moving on to the second item, 029-20.
Oh, Ben, can I say we didn't receive any public comments on that legislation? But I don't know if you want to ask Alderman Arnett if he wants to speak on the legislation.
I don't see him here on the screen. Is he on the screen? I'm not just seeing him, or?
Oh.
I think he's gone. Oh, by the way, how would the public have known to make comment from the city council and previously, I guess, on this item? Dr. Nash?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
How would the public have known to submit through the Planning and Zoning Department comments on this if this is the first time we're having that here? Other than, and I know it's been talked about in the past, about a couple of months ago, but point being,
just from it being on the agenda.
Just from being on the agenda. Okay, so you haven't received any to yet. That's a good point. Thank you for clarifying that, Dr. Nash. Moving, anything for, okay, we don't have any other question for staff, but since we do have Councilman Councilwoman Tierney still on. Alderman Tierney, would you like to comment or anything real quickly on the 1919 auto transportation facilities?
Very quickly, and I'm sorry for the background noise. It's my husband chopping away. I just feel very uncomfortable with this legislation. I apologize to my colleague. I just think it's the cart before the horse. We should really wait until we have a comprehensive review of Title 22 before we start, working on something like this. I think it is a reaction, a specific project reaction that's just sort of been sitting around for now a year, and I just think it should go back to the drawing board. I apologize to my colleague, but and get in, when we do a comprehensive review of Title 22, we can look at it then. But this is, I strongly feel, is the cart before the horse. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Alderman Tierney. Is there any other alderman on the line that would like to make a comment?
Sorry, Ross.
Ross, yeah, I can't blame him for one. And this is one of Ross's projects that he was really pushing and to try to get it complete and done through review and legislative drafts. There's been a lot of work on this for sure. Okay, no other comments from the council members. We'll proceed on to Dr. Nash's 029-20. Annapolis Small Cell System Guidelines, basically a cell phone system. Go ahead.
Ben, before she goes on, did we put the exhibit in the record?
We already did. It's Exhibit A a while back of
you did.
019-20 and 029. Got it.
You did. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mhm.
But thank you for checking. Appreciate it, Tammy. You can go back to sleep now, Tammy. Just kidding. Dr. Nash.
Leaving. Tammy is furiously keeping track of everything. Tammy,
I know she does. She's working her butt off back there.
Have everything else sorted out?
All right, 029-20 cell phones.
Okay, before we do though, if we want to sort some things out, Jackie just brought to my attention that back, I guess on the very first item, the Zelenakis emails were received after the meeting. I included them on the July 22nd meeting, and she reminded me that they shouldn't have been because they were not submitted until the 23rd. So we need to, put those into the record for this meeting.
Okay, they were entered into the record as being part of the overall public comment item. And that has been viewed as an item exhibit letter that doesn't change. And as more emails get added to it, they just get added to that same alphabetical exhibit number instead of making separate exhibits for each email we get. So automatically it should go under that, or am I wrong?
For the public comment, I don't make them an exhibit. I just put them in like they were actually at the podium. So I've created a little table, as you saw in the minutes, and I don't include them as an exhibit, but we do need to put them in the public record, or at least mention it on record that they. Okay,
the Villanakis email, which we've all, submission for public comment, we have read that. And we are submitting it in correction, not from the July 22nd meeting, just after and part of this meeting is public comment for the podium. Does that work, Ms. Hook?
That works for me. And then one last thing, we still haven't determined when we're going to allow the public hearing to go to. Is it going to be like September 23rd, or is it going to be September 3rd? So
it's planned on being September 3rd right now, is from what I know. Mr. Waldman, any changes to that?
It's fine with me.
So the comment portion for 019 will close out on the 3rd when we meet, correct?
Possibly. I mean, they could always continue it if they wanted to, but it should be closing out on September 3rd, which is in a week and a half.
Okay, thanks. I'm good.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Great. So now on to small cell systems, which is a new technology that will eventually enable 5G connectivity. So we have a lot of cell phone carriers who are very interested in installing these systems everywhere in the city. The FCC says we are not allowed to prohibitively or effectively prohibit them, is the language the FCC uses. So we can add restrictions and code requirements, but we cannot prohibit them in the city. So we basically modeled our ordinance on the county's ordinance, and we are working to develop guidelines, which I have included the draft version of, and I'm eager to hear any comments you've had. Since I worked on those draft guidelines, I found some from Madison that I really like. I think I will incorporate those. So I would like to work on the guidelines with getting more public input, getting input from the industry, getting input from city council, making sure we have everything and that we really are going to get as attractive looking facilities as we can, because these are important for 5G connectivity, but because the signal is so small, you have to put up a lot of them for them to be effective. And eventually you will also have to add fiber connectivity. So there's going to be a lot of archaeology required in the historic district. And we basically just don't want to have these huge antennas all over the city. So we've started getting a lot of interest from companies like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint. They typically try to put these facilities in public right-of-ways where they already have poles. They don't like to co-locate with each other, but we are requiring that they do that unless it is not feasible. The facilities sometimes have to be as close as 200 feet from one another. The city code currently doesn't have any language about this kind of technology at all. And so this would allow the use, but add standards and fees. Our fees are higher than what the FCC sets as a limit, but we feel like we are justified in having a higher fee because Anne Arundel County had this fee and because it's an expensive place to do construction and to do work. So we feel like our fees are justified. Before a company is allowed to install small cell technology, they will have to have a lease agreement with the city. They will have to have the permit and they will have to have a bond. They will also have to guarantee that they will remove equipment that is no longer in use, which has been an issue with some of our other cell technology. There are a lot of guidelines and specifications that are shown in the draft guidelines. And our goal is to accommodate the technology, but also to protect the streetscapes, not just downtown, but throughout the city. So I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but we've also taken into account things like how to protect trees when they're putting up poles, preferred design options, limits on elevation, and a preference for stealth and concealment methods. So it's not obvious that there's an antenna there. So please let me know if you have any questions on what the ordinance allows or what we're looking for the guidelines.
Question with the control box, and it showed 10 feet above the ground for that control box. And the reason why I'm asking is I'm going to give you an example. Verizon has some boxes for communications at the end of Cherry Grove Avenue, as well as other streets, where those control boxes are at accessible head height. So whether that's for ease of the manipulation of what's inside the box or not, it gets in the way of people walking down the street because a lot of our telephone poles are already in the middle of the sidewalks. So it presents quite an issue. It presents a visible issue. You can't see through them for traffic. It actually blinds traffic from seeing people at the intersections. So I want to make sure that these control boxes are going to be in an elevation and required such that they're, and I'm not sure of the size of them by this, the pictures depicting them, how big they would actually be, but I want to make sure that they're at least not, you know, I see the 10-foot here. I wouldn't want them to be less than that and get a ladder to access them. Is there anything that restricts them in their height where they are on the pole from the ground?
They have to be at least 7 feet high for
7.
ADA. For ADA.
7 feet to me doesn't cut the mustard. I mean, humans are getting really tall these days.
They can, I mean, we can make it higher, so.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a concern I have. We need, so, but you said 7 feet. And how big are those proposed radio cabinets is what they're called? Any idea dimensions on those?
I've seen different sizes. It seems to vary.
Okay.
And that's why I want to look at seeing what are the options for putting the cabinetry underground. That might be hard in the historic district, but I think that Madison does require that, at least in certain parts of Madison. And
Really? Underground?
so I would like to look at the feasibility of that. I'd also like to look at the feasibility of, you know, if they touch a sidewalk, I want them to then bring that sidewalk into ADA compliance. So there's at least 36 inches around the pole where people can walk, rather than often you see in Eastport with the utility pole stuck right in the middle of the sidewalk. So
Yeah.
I'd like to use this as an opportunity to bring more of our sidewalks into compliance if they're already, you know, messing with the area. I think guidelines. Yeah.
It's basically on page 4. I view out in at least my neighborhood, I view page 4, that picture being the majority of what we would see out here. And you see in every 200 feet, which is you know, my street, that's every 5th house. You might have one of these. So you probably see maybe 5 of them on a street. That's a lot of cabinets getting installed on wooden telephone poles in the Homewood Germantown area. I'm not a fan of number 4. We got to figure something out with that. But I mean, 5G, I understand people want that. And they're going to want to put it everywhere they can in a highly dense area like ours. So I'm concerned, to be sure. Especially in Homewood Germantown, I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I can say is I'm concerned at the moment.
So are we. We are.
Underground, I would think the propagation and signal would be hindered. So they want to get these things where the antenna's on top of the pole. I get it. That looks great. But the box problem, the cabinet and the power meter at the base of the poles, that's my concern. Not so much the antenna on top of the pole. And
okay. You don't like the cabinet at the base of the pole?
Not in Homewood Germantown, because all of our poles are pretty much in the middle of our sidewalks. Not all, but many.
Yeah. Sure.
Underneath the cabinet and the power meter, if you put them underneath the sidewalk, because that's not a transmission device. The cabinet and power meter, it just needs to be accessible. So like you have let's say you put a square manhole cover over the cabinet underneath, built into the sidewalk. That would be great, because then it's not on the pole and it's not providing that big blocking of view. I know it's a lot more costly to do that, but maybe we can require that maybe put into the sidewalk and have an access plate like you would for gas meters and water meters. And the antenna on top of the pole, I don't have an issue with that.
Okay.
Anybody else at the moment?
No, I'm in line with you.
Yeah, so am I. But I do have a question though. Well, what we're being asked to do, are we being asked to look only at the legislation or also at the design manual?
Oh, no, I would love for you to look at the design manual. It's just that the design manual doesn't have to be approved at the same time as the ordinance. It can come later. I mean, I would like them to move together, but does have to be approved by city council and posted online for comments, but there, I have a little bit more flexibility with it and what goes in there. So I would love comments on both.
So, okay. So on September the 3rd, are we voting on just the legislation or also on the manual?
Just the legislation.
Just the legislation. But we can make comments about what we think about the whole thing, such as what Ben just said.
Yes.
Okay. And you would like it to move forward so that we make a decision on the 3rd?
On the ordinance.
On the ordinance, so that.
If you're ready.
Something
Yeah.
on the books. Okay. Okay. No, I thought that Ben's comments were fantastic, and I totally agree with them. And you're right, and every 200, 300, 400 feet, that's a lot of these.
That's right. It's crazy. And I'll give you some examples. Well, not of this, but something, a stretch. Down at Bay Ridge, there's that evergreen tree that looks like it should be in Colorado that doesn't belong. By the CVS Farms. Well, that's a cell phone tower. Now, what kind of jackleg thing would be in the manual that they'd say, oh, they approved the manual, we can do this here, and look, we've got, it's a rock, you know, and somebody would put they would put this rock looking structure in downtown to cover the box.
That's our urban canopy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but and not to mention, we're all getting zapped by this high frequency. 'Cause that's why it's 200 feet, because the frequency is so high. And at a higher frequency, you can carry a lot higher data. But with higher frequency, you cannot penetrate structures as easily as a lower frequency. And I know this because I was a radar guy in the Navy. Lower frequency, you can put a tower every 5 miles like you see on the highway. That's what your standard cell phone service is. 5G, a lot of data, very high frequency. Therefore, your transmission distances come down why you see 200 feet and not 5 miles. My worry is the application of it in the town. Sure, I'm for it being in the town. Everybody's going to want it in downtown, but the application of this, and also when it gets outdated, this is something that's not. This is the last. I'm not going to be the next meeting, but when something gets outdated, like the fiber optic network, which I had a lengthy conversation with an installer out here and his boss about the future of what we're going to see on our telephone poles. And in Helmwood, Germantown, we have these huge spools on a couple of streets of wire still stuck up there. And that comes from an application of, well, we only get 300-foot sections, 100-foot or 10-foot sections. So if I got to go in between there, I got all this extra and I just leave it hanging up there because I don't want to splice it. Because if I splice it, then it could come undone. It's more risky. So you get these huge spools of wire up there. You also have the old copper network wires up there. And they don't remove them because they're not required. I would want to see something in the legislation that says when these systems become outdated and they're no longer being used, that they have to be removed. Because
well, it's in the
otherwise,
legislation. It's considered abandoned.
Yeah.
For 12 months.
Well, you can say it all you want, but then they leave a lot of stuff up there. Copper's still being used and some other things are being used, but if it's no longer being used, I want to see it be mandatory that it's removed.
It is in there and they're subject to a fine if they do not remove.
And they have to post a bond. Right? They have to post a bond for each one.
Because of the exact situation that you're talking about, Ben. So, yeah.
Okay. But those are my concerns for you guys to table at your next meeting. That's it.
Okay.
That's all I have. Anybody else?
We did receive one public comment from our liaison at the Navy, at Naval Facilities, NSA, I should say, and we are working with them. They would like to help us develop the guidelines. They're interested in what we're doing for our legislation because they've also been approached, and they would like to also at least informally, if not formally, have a role in our review process because they are also looking at things like the FCC requirements that there are certain companies, like some Chinese companies, the wireless companies are not allowed to use equipment from certain Chinese companies. So I don't know if the city is really going to be looking at that, but if we have the Navy looking at it, that, you know, they're going to be making sure that we're following all of.
And when you say NSA, do you mean National Security Agency or do you mean the Naval Support Activity?
No, sorry, I mean Naval Support Annapolis.
They're right. I just want to make that known to the public. This is the Naval Support Annapolis, but they are concerned because of a higher NSA concern. So it's a little bit of a juxtaposition of it. Okay, yes, we received that item. I'm going to open up, well, any other questions before we open up the public comment section for Ms. Nash? Okay, I'll open up the public comment session on 02920. Members of the public, please feel free to make comment online through the Planning and Zoning Department's website on the Annapolis Small Cell System Guidelines, also known as 5G antennas that could be installed throughout the city.
And then there's also 2 resolutions that go with the ordinance. There's the fines and the fees. So just make those run travel with the ordinance. Just make sure. I don't think that you have to review resolutions. Maybe Joel or Christopher Beard can weigh in on that, but I think you just give recommendations to ordinances. But you could also make a recommendation on the resolutions if you felt so inclined.
Well, since Bob's going to be chairing this at the next meeting, let's make sure he's crystal clear on what we can and can't, or what we're expected to do with this. So, legal, Bob?
I'll leave it up to our paid counsel.
Certainly we'll make recommendations and we'll take it as we go.
Sally, I would, somewhere, I think, I don't know what anyway, the resolutions I didn't read, so I don't know what's in.
Yeah, it's setting the fee schedule and the fines schedule. So I'm not sure. It's not something you would typically review, but so, but it's there if you have any questions about it or if you have any recommendations for it.
Okay. All right.
Excuse me, good grief. Okay, well that it's already 10:34 and we've been presented. The next meeting, which will be chaired by Mr. Bob Waldman.
I have a housekeeping. How do you circulate these for signature, or do you authorize signatures? And
Circulate what?
The opinion that, for example, tonight needs your signatures. How do you arrange for that?
Everyone saw, I would hope that they all saw your email and responded to you with any questions. That's how we do it for reviewing the opinion and order. The opinion and order that we approved back in item number 1, correct? You're referencing? Mr.
Yeah,
Perry?
I'm just saying, yes. Back in the day, if I were sitting there and I'd go in front of each of you and say, sign here. So how do you sign these opinions where I have a signature line for you, or do you no longer do that?
I would, well, it's a good procedure. I would say by email, we give you an email and I approve my signature for this document as written. That's what I would say. You can have that email as evidence. I would think that's correct. Is that legally okay?
Yes, it would be. So I guess I need that from each of you. And
Okay.
then I'll send it on. Thank you.
But we did vote on it unanimously for approval of that opinion. So that vote, I would think, would count, but as a signature, right? Correct.
Let me get back to you, all of you. If I need your signature, I'll do it by email. Okay? I want to check and get back to you.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that takes care of the legislation items and the public hearings for the evening. So the public hearing part of tonight is closed, but the 2 items of legislation are still open until September 3rd for our next public meeting. All right, before we adjourn, is there any other cleanup items that we want to talk about? And I know that we've had from Tom Smith, you're still there? We got the record.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, still here.
Newtown 20
Yes, sir.
for signature.
Yes, sir.
There you go. Everybody can see that. Now that would be for me to sign, but usually we would show this to everybody else. Did everyone else get a copy of this or not so much?
I did.
Okay, did anybody find any issue with the way it was depicted or anything not on the record plat that we would want? Because this is what we need to make sure of, is when things are on the plat and need to be on there or worded properly as we deemed necessary. So did anyone have any issue with the items on the record plat for Newtown 20?
I move we approve the record plat.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Waldman. Okay, you beat me to it. Wonderful. All those in favor of approving the record plat as depicted, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous, 5-0. Ms. Hook, make sure you include Mr. Iams as a yes. Okay, and you actually will need a signature from me, so I can sign this and drop it off to you.
I will, Chairman, I will actually bring you or set a time with you to sign the original Mylar.
Yeah, the nice one. Okay. Yeah, and
Yes,
I'll
sir.
go downtown and visit you and get COVID and sign it down there. That'll work well. There we go. You've been hearing my cough. I had a COVID test this week and I was negative. Evidently, I had a serious sinus infection over the last week and a half, or ragweed or something. I don't know what, my doctor doesn't even know what it is, but it's not coronavirus. So
I had one from the city on last Monday and it only took 2 days to get my results.
it was the same for me. And I had flu-like symptoms, you name it. I had everything under the sun, but I never lost my sense of taste or smell. But I had the test done and negative, so I don't know what it is. Anyone else feeling bad for this time of year? Okay, noted. All right. I
Only
have
because it's past my bedtime now.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
all right.
We're still
I
on
move to
YouTube.
adjourn. I make a
We're still
motion to
broadcasting.
adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? None. Meeting is hereby closed. Please take us off YouTube.